Crowded street. One loud slap. A black woman humiliated in front of everyone, and the crowd goes silent. But then the truth drops. She's Judge Tiana Coleman, and with one word, she can end his career. ABC's loaded, lawyers show up, and that shiny badge, it starts to crack. Stick around, because this is where power flips and justice gets loud. A piercing siren faded into the city's usual urban din, a low hum punctuated by honking cabs and hurried footsteps. In the midst of this, two figures clashed like oil meeting water. Officer Gary Reynolds, a man whose sense of duty was eclipsed by his authoritative fervor, squared off against an unknown adversary. Unknown to him, but not unknown to the world at large, Judge Tiana Coleman, a distinguished presence in the judicial community, known for her unwavering justice. The sidewalks heaved with activity, strollers weaving between suits and casuals, tourists snapping photos of the nearby skyline. But suddenly, the flow staggered to a halt. The atmosphere crackled with the raw tension of misunderstood power dynamics, playing out in an unanticipated scene at the corner of 5th and Main. Officer Reynolds, a man quick to judge and quicker to act, had needled his way through the crowd, eyes fixated on Judge Coleman. She stood adjacent to a delivery bike tipped over, a man nursing his pride while attempting to collect his scattered goods. Reynolds heard the word thief thrown around, though it was merely a murmur without substance. A glance was all he needed, a glance at the dignified woman in smart attire who he felt did not belong. "Stop right there," Reynolds barked, voice carrying an edge honed from years of commanding the streets. His hand hovered instinctively over the metal at his side. Tiana's jaw hardened, her heart thumping a steady drum in her chest as she met his gaze. A moment stretched, but before it could snap back to normalcy, a hand was on her shoulder, unwarranted, forceful, a single gesture that would unravel histories of unseen battles fought against assumptions and intolerance. "I said stop!" The officer's voice raised another decibel, cutting through the urban melody. Tiana's eyes flashed defiance, refusing to yield to the weight of wrongly wielded authority. She pulled herself free, her voice slicing through the rising chorus of witnesses' disbelief. "This is unacceptable. You have no right." Tiana's calm assertion seemed to ricochet off Reynolds, who refused reflection. A slap echoed, a sharp, stinging degradation. It silenced onlookers, rendered loud even amidst the mechanical whirl and ever-present chatter. In that moment, identity was blurred. Victim and authority were grotesquely reversed. Phones shot up in unison, recording devices documenting the audacious scene for a virtual tapestry of public judgment. The act was swift, a blistering encroachment that left no room for Reynolds or the watching bystanders to comprehend the monumental error underway. Only Tiana held steadfast, her eyes like molten steel, conveying a truth he could not yet grasp. Her silence, profound and unyielding, spoke the volumes history could never hush. "What have you done, officer?" Her voice, now calm but seismic, begged him to glimpse the shattered confines of power and prejudice. Reynolds paused, his vision narrowing, thoughts stuttering over the cliff of his actions. But still arrogance held him firm, a false armor against the surfacing guilt. "Step back," he commanded, though the tremor in his tone belied the authority intended. An air of confusion ebbed through the pallid faces gathering, an accomplice to the unforeseen narrative shift. The murmurs grew again, questions and disbelief rippling outward, whispers branding him, asking the unwritten questions that damn as effectively as reality. "Who is she?" the crowd wondered aloud. And as if in answer, the sea of faces parted slightly. A prominent lawyer, recognizable in local circuits, approached amidst the commotion. "He's a judge. You've just assaulted a judge." His voice boomed over the confused din, a harbinger of truths now flowing unabated. In an instant, the scales of power teetered, the officer's resolve faltering under the implications, eyes widened in the realization of what his rashness had wrought. Reynolds froze, the implications settling like ice shavings on bare skin as Tiana, unbowed, stood as a colossal testament to his folly. The street hummed with activity, a collective realization sparking an onslaught of recordings, murmured conversations brewing into condemnatory testimony, justice terribly shaken, stood upon the brink. And thus began the unwritten tale of a trial not just of law, but hope, not just of individuals, but of systems, waiting to be challenged and changed. In the chaos, one bystander, capturing it all live on social media, whispered the sentiment echoing through the crowd. "This will change things. Mark my words." And indeed, it would. Would the story paint him a villain or a victim of his own ignorance? The future, now uncertain, foolishly hopeful in the face of justice, hung precariously, ready for the pen of action to write its next chapter. The murmur from the crowd grew into a cacophony of disbelieving voices, some shouting while others whispered fervently. On the fringes, a young woman with short blonde hair and a camera in hand turned to her friend, eyes wide. "Did you see that? He didn't even hesitate. It was like he knew nothing but his badge." Her friend, a burly man wearing a New York Knicks jersey, nodded in disbelief. "This is going to blow up. Cameras never blink." He gestured around them, where smartphones were held aloft like torches in a sea of enthusiasts. "You think it'll go viral?" the woman asked, eyebrow arched. "Hell yeah," the man replied, his voice dripping with certainty. "A white cop hits a black judge in public? That's the kind of justice fuck-up the internet loves to tear apart." In the center of this nascent social media storm, Tiana stood a living pillar of calm in a sea of internal shock. Her composure unwavering, she grappled with the realization that this incident, raw and unapologetically unfair, was now a public matter. Her personal confrontations played out on a worldwide stage. The transformation from anonymity to viral sensation, from judge to symbol, shifted under her feet. Reynolds, reeling more from the revelation of her true status than remorse, was cornered by the weight of consequence. He hadn't just assaulted a citizen, he'd struck a figurehead of the very system in which he served. His radio crackled with static interference, echoing the disarray in his mind. As officers arrived in marked cars, their faces registering collective understanding veiled in practiced neutrality, Reynolds retreated slightly, his prior confidences evaporating in the face of incontrovertible reality. Uniforms moved in formation, each step deliberate, as if choreographed for decay and semblance of control. "Keep back," came the voices of authority, dispersing the throngs, still vying for optimal angles on their screens. The thin line between law enforcement and public safety wavered notably, the officers' attempts at dispersal halted by the gravity rooting everyone in place. An amplified call for respect was met with resistance, a reminder of the locales bearing witness to an imbalance too often seen before. Conversations twisted around themes of race, authority, and justice, burgeoning into debates not only overheated, but decades in the making. A middle-aged man, dressed in a sharp gray suit with wisps of silver hair glinting in the sunlight, surveyed the scene with a quiet authority that belied his outward calm. This was Stephen Morris, a respected civil rights lawyer whose name often surfaced in the media. Stephen's gaze honed in on Tiana, approaching with purpose etched into the very lines of his face. "Judge Coleman," he called out, just as the police formed a buffer between her and the throng. She acknowledged him with a nod, familiar with his reputation for justice and reform. "Mr. Morris," Tiana replied, voice steady, underscoring her intention. This was but the beginning of something larger than even she could fully comprehend. "Don't worry, Judge," Stephen assured. His voice softened for her ears alone. "This won't just end as another captured incident. This will ignite change." Interjected urgency from nearby officers reminded everyone of the deepening complexities. "We need to wrap this up," one officer announced, confirming Tiana's dread that bureaucracy might attempt to obscure retribution once again. But Stephen's presence promised more than temporary confrontation. It signified the inception of yet another pivotal quest towards justice and reform. The juxtaposition of their synonymous goals illuminated the shared path they vowed silently to traverse. "You have my full support," Stephen continued, allowing his promise to hang tangible in the air. buoyed by the sweeping glances of those capturing the last remnants of footage meant to ignite public outcry. Moments ticked by, realigning the lives implicated in this accidental intersection. A quiet resolve was blooming, born from an incomprehension turned into steely, focused aim. Tiana's placid demeanor erupted internally into a myriad of plans, each decision weighed for its potential impact on a systemic problem far outweighing a single transgression. Mingling with officers, Stephen gathered details, gauging the situation's temperature while beckoning community leaders through terse texts. Soon the entire city would know what had transpired, and, in its wake, complex discussions would form around public tables, a necessary preamble to the era of accountability Tiana wished to usher forth. Across the sea of faces documenting history, empathy began to supplant mere curiosity, setting the stage for the intense outpouring of support and scrutiny that would soon sweep the nation. As the scene shifted towards finality, the seeds planted that day ensured future reckonings took root, a continuum of justice inaugurated by a single reckless act. Within mere hours, the incident had cascaded beyond the confines of the busy street, swiftly enveloping both news outlets and social media in a frenzy of speculation and outcry. Snippets of the encounter were broadcast repeatedly, the slap replayed in grainy digital loops that fueled a singular narrative: the abuse of authoritative power. At the forefront of this digital maelstrom was Judge Tiana Coleman, her image and story rippling through networks both national and global. Hashtags proliferated, their virtual banners rallying cries for justice, equity, and reform. Justice for judge and police violence, racism on trial, each tag a testament to collective urgency for change. Chicago's civic heart pulsed with renewed awareness, the city alerted to the brewing storm on its horizon. Legal discussions erupted around ethical coffee tables and bar association halls, thrusting Tiana into the spotlight as an unwitting figurehead for institutional and systemic change. It was layers deeper than a single act. It spoke to the myriad of untold stories, muted by shadowed intimidation. Network anchors addressed their audiences with corresponding gravity to the unfolding situation. A well-known news host, Alicia Rivera, bravely weighed in during her segment, voice steady as she delineated the broader implications. This isn't just a case of mistaken identity. This is emblematic of the broader systemic issues communities of color continue to face, everyday struggles against biases that have become alarmingly routine. Across the cityscape, placards calling for justice waved high in organized protests. Communities coalesced around the rallying point of the incident. The palpable mood was woven from equal parts outrage and the relentless pursuit of accountability. Behind closed office doors in the city's legal high places, conversations commenced between legal advocates and policymakers, urging concrete actions amidst the public uproar. The courtroom of public opinion awaited more than symbolic gestures. Now was the time for profound systemic reform. It was at this juncture, amidst escalating public demonstrations, that City Councilwoman Teresa Ingram took decisive action. Her voice imbued with resolve as she addressed a press conference hastily arranged to confront the burgeoning crisis. "We are instituting a comprehensive inquiry into this incident," Teresa proclaimed, her words clear over the persistent whir of cameras capturing her every move. "Moreover, we are drafting an immediate response committee aimed at ensuring accountability within our law enforcement agencies." Each phrase was punctuated by notes of reform, an unencumbered promise that ingested the charged environment like the first fresh air intake after prolonged submersion. The speech resonated across the council room, spilling into living rooms and handheld screens. Councilwoman Ingram's initiative brought even greater weight to Judge Coleman's ordeal, succinctly encapsulating a larger narrative. Change was possible, but it required vigilance and unity. Stephen Morris observed from among the crowd, quietly nodding as the councilwoman concluded her statement. His presence here was tactical, symbolic. It tethered the turmoil back to their common goal of systemic overhaul. He understood implicitly, as did Tiana, that this was merely the prologue to a sweeping array of actions that could lift their pursuits beyond fleeting chance. The newsroom lit up in fevered discussion once more, networks extrapolating predictions and projections from Teresa's revelation. Would a city divided by the pain of prejudice find common ground for sovereignty and justice equal to all? Back at the courthouse, Tiana's chambers became a center for fervent activity, her assistants filtering through countless messages of solidarity and necessity. Colleagues from around the nation dialed in with their unwavering support, their camaraderie regrettably forged through similar missteps and passive ignorance. In the weeks that followed, a mosaic of events unfolded. Meetings, sit-ins, public forums, a brushstroke on a canvas that sought to humanize legislative intent. No longer could cries of injustice be simply archived as impalpable noise. This incident served as an unmistakable inflection point. As the incident simmered beneath the public consciousness, feeding its fuel of desired reform, Tiana continued rallying through her engagements with advocacy groups and networks. She made it emphatically clear that her involvement was not just as a victim, but as an agent of change, one who had embraced the burden of turning trial into tribunal. In short order, the landscape shifted from one tragedy into collective action. As Tiana's resolve pierced through doubt, each step forward undeterred by prior intimidation, America watched with bated breath, its communities abounding with questions as to what defined justice in a society saturated with the familiar taint of disparity. Across these discussions, one unwavering thread wound its way. This isn't a single woman's fight, it is ours. The floodgates had opened, and through them streamed the collective march toward a vigilant, accountable future. As the vibrant protest outside City Hall gained momentum, the building's corridors hummed with an intensity rarely felt. The mosaic of voices raised in union blended into one commanding presence demanding reform. It was an atmosphere charged with anticipation, a tidal wave ready to crash upon the shores of complacency. Inside, Tiana Coleman found herself navigating the hallways where power and justice intertwined. Her presence was undeniable, each step a testament to the courage she embodied as both a victim and a judge. Passionate activists accompanied her, their voices weaving a tapestry of support bound together by common resolve. Beside her, Stephen Morris strode purposefully, armed with a briefcase bursting with affidavits, complaints, and formal petitions. These were their weapons against systemic inaction, each page a battlefront in their shared mission for institutional accountability. A procedural meeting with city officials had been arranged following Councilwoman Ingram's decisive announcement, and as they entered the meeting room, Tiana's mind was a catalyst for strategic action. Around the table sat a mix of city council members, legal advisors, and community leaders, faces fixed with solemn expressions, each wearied by familiarity with the cause, yet fueled by the hunger for tangible change. Councilwoman Ingram, seated at the head, acknowledged Tiana and Stephen with a nod that spoke volumes of their shared commitment. With a firm voice, she began, "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. The events that have transpired are a fractal representation of the systemic issues we must tackle head-on." Stephen wasted no time, his voice assertive yet tinged with gravity. "We must initiate policy reform that extends beyond surface adjustments. This includes in-depth training for law enforcement on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. The aim here is to transform how power is wielded within our communities." Skepticism wove through a few faces, and Tiana seized the moment. Her voice, resolute but tempered with hope, punctured the atmosphere. "We are living in a moment that cries out for significant change. If we tackle this not just as a response to an isolated incident, but a step toward pervasive reform, we can set a precedent for a fairer system." A pause lingered, a silent consideration of the gravity of their collective decisions. Data and statistics flashed across monitors as representatives presented the glaring disparities within current systems of enforcement. The numbers told a striking story. Violence and unjust treatment skewed disproportionately against minority communities. Council members nodded slowly, their expressions shifting from skepticism to a cautious determination. The conversation seamlessly shifted from problem identification to proactive planning. Proposals flew across the table. A hybrid training program developed in conjunction with civil rights organizations, an oversight committee elected by community members, and an anonymous reporting mechanism to encourage whistleblowing within the force. These solutions, though ambitious, were charged with an authenticity that reflected Tiana's initial confrontation, now a catalyst for structural evolution. Councilwoman Ingram encouraged the dialogue, reiterating that change needed intensity, longevity, and relentless advocacy. As deliberations continued, an unexpected shift transpired. An officer silently entered the room. His uniform was crisp, his demeanor disciplined, yet humility shadowed his presence. It took a moment for Tiana to recognize Sergeant Michael Daniels, a veteran of the force known for advocating reform from within. His attendance spoke to the unity bridging different facets of the city's justice system. Daniels addressed the assembly, his voice earnest. As officers, we're often caught between intention and execution. I've seen firsthand the injustices that can happen. What we need is a comprehensive restructuring, an evolution of identity that puts community at the heart of everything we do. The words left an indelible mark on those present, embedding themselves in the framework of immediate action. Suddenly, what seemed initially daunting assumed a measure of cohesive optimism. Opposing factions found common ground, and dialogue flowed with newfound determination. Tiana found herself contemplating the figure before her, an ally where she might have expected only resistance. It confirmed her belief that the journey toward justice is not solitary but communal, a symbiotic weave of perspectives and experiences, overlapping and strengthening. With procedural documents signed and initiatives planned, there was a palpable shift in the room. This was no longer just an idea born out of controversy. It was the preservation of dignity, equality tempered by the crucible of public perseverance. As the meeting disbanded, Teresa and others lingered, exchanging resolute affirmations about the path forward. Across cityscapes and communities, a sense of collective endeavor took root, a pursuit no longer swayed by the weight of institutional reticence. Outside, the voices of protest waned just enough for hope to echo beneath the city's industrial huma, whisper of conviction beneath the tumultuous roars, heralding an era yet to be defined by the voices within and beyond these walls. With a silent prayer of gratitude, Tiana stepped outside, greeted by the hopeful faces of her ally. It was a sight punctuated by cloudy skies painted in hues of determination, boding well for the struggle that lay ahead. In the heart of Chicago, amid the restless tides of progress, transformation had begun in earnest. The precinct bustled more than usual, its walls vibrating with an undercurrent of unease. News of the incident hadn't just stopped at the street corner. It had seeped into the marrow of the station, its arrival like smoke through cracks in a closed door. Officer Gary Reynolds sat at his desk, a bastion of discomfort amid uniform-clad colleagues moving around him with tentative acknowledgement. His place in the station, a bastion of protected authority, felt icy, isolating, as his peers addressed him with the scripted lines of formality, avoiding the reality everyone quietly pondered. The reputation he'd wielded like a shield against any hint of doubt now lay jagged and exposed. It hadn't yet sunk in completely. The media firestorm, the procedural inquiries, the subsequent dragging of his name through the mud. His phone screen emitted a dim glow, feeds flooded with mentions of his name, situated squarely alongside hashtags denoting the unequivocal call for justice. It was an anomaly turned phenomenon that left him reeling in its merciless wake. Reynolds's commanding officer, Captain Evelyn Norris, stood in the narrow doorway like a reaper come to sever him from the softened cushion of unchallenged conduct. Her stature was compact and her demeanor direct, years in the force instilling a no-nonsense approach that made distractions dwindle into irrelevance. "Reynolds, in my office, now." Her voice broke through, low yet resonant, cutting the ambient chatter in their shared space. The hallway leading to her office seemed to amplify his isolation, the echo of each footstep reverberating through his psyche. Upon entry, Norris gestured to a chair facing her desk. clearing her throat like one preparing to cut straight to the bone of honest conversation. "Gary, I don't have to tell you that you're in deep," she began, leaning forward with resolve as stone-set features assumed the helm of their exchange. "The whole department's image is taking a hit because of one goddamn mistake." Her eyes narrowed, a laser gaze that seemed to pierce straight through any pretense. He squirmed, discomfort wrestling with the weight of guilt, though denial lay close at hand, eager to take root. But beneath his defensive veneer lurked an understanding, nascent and fledgling, making him suddenly aware of the precarious threshold he now danced upon. "You need to understand that compliance isn't a suggestion, it's the very mandate of our service," Norris added, a punctuating force backing each word. "Not just for you, but for every single officer under my command and every civilian on these streets." Reynolds swallowed hard, textured silence reigning momentarily before he found his voice, a voice uncertain, searching. "Captain, I didn't know she was a judge. I mean, that changes everything." "Doesn't it?" he ventured, clutching vainly at straws to drum up an altered narrative, some refuge from the guilt-ridden gale. Norris shook her head slowly, the gesture laden with a sorrow born out of recognition. "Gary, that's precisely your shortcoming right there. Her title shouldn't matter. It's the principle of our roles and the respect they demand, not just for authority but for basic humanity." The gravity of her delivery pulled at the seams of his defense, a deep void echoing where confidence once resided. He sat inert, shadows lining his eyes as revelation settled, with chilling finality. "I want you on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the internal investigation," Norris concluded, interlocking her fingers over folded documentation, the very parchment reflecting the official trajectory his career now teetered upon. As Reynolds absorbed her words, he detected no malice, no harsh resentment, only a steadfast adherence to duty and integrity. Yet understanding her intent felt akin to deciphering an unfamiliar language, his own mind still clouded by misapprehension and defensive pride. "Administration, why?" he retorted, voice crackling with a note of incredulity. "The press? The commotion outside?" Norris remained patient, her expression softening marginally as her hands relaxed. "Gary, this is about accountability, that fundamental cornerstone we built this uniform on," she said, leaning back as if framing her response within the larger architecture of ethical duty. "Think on what happened. Reflect," she urged, eyes not bereft of empathy despite the weight of her authority. "We have a responsibility to our community, to reshape and heal the trust we've fractured." His silence this time was different, not absence, but assimilation as the captain's words began to penetrate the surface of his deflections. Back at his desk, Reynolds saw his station not as a sanctuary but the figurative limbo-tinctured cell his actions had created, a nudge toward introspection. Isolated yet powerful in its reach, tension lay heavy in the air, that anticipation of shifts yet to be determined, paths yet to be chosen. The precinct gathered laboriously toward the grind of routine resumption, yet, under the sheen of normalcy, an irreversible transformation took root. Around Reynolds, officers continued their duties, each face carrying shadows of the same internal dialogue he now broached, a shared moral reckoning cloaked beneath duty's purview, tugging toward questions of direction and virtue. In the larger scope of duty, consequence found a foothold, and to that own tale's chapter, history bore witness a testament as dignified as it was necessary to chart the unfamiliar terrain of systemic soul-searching. Herein lay the legacy they must fashion together, cell by cell, until the daylight broke anew, relentless and illuminating. In the days following the incident, Judge Tiana Coleman found herself navigating a treacherous terrain of media scrutiny and public intrigue. Her chambers, usually a haven of legal analysis and thoughtful deliberation, were now engulfed by the ceaseless echo of the outside world seeking answers, opinions, reaction. The placid demeanor she maintained on the steps of the courthouse belied the turbulence beneath, a maelstrom of identity and responsibility crashing against the shores of her professional life. Reporters loitered outside the courthouse, lenses trained not just on an unfolding public narrative, but on the woman at its heart, Tiana, whose identity had transitioned abruptly from arbiter to emblem. A deep breath and another sip of coffee fortified her resolve, as she entered her chambers, prepared to meet the day's challenges. Assistants shuffled paperwork into tidy stacks, and the light hum of clerical efficiency filled the room. Still, every interaction hummed with the recognition of heightened stakes. Tiana paused at her desk, flooded momentarily by the incongruity of the present moment juxtaposed with the measured cadence of her judicial career. Her mind raced, fluttering between thoughts of personal impact and societal consequence. A mental symphony searching for harmony amidst discord. Her daughter, Emily, had called earlier, concern lacing her voice, even as she assured Tiana of her support. The conversation replayed in her mind. "Mom, it's all over the news. Everyone at school is talking about it. Are you okay?" Emily's words had flowed with equal parts anxiety and maturity, unusual yet welcome insights from her 16-year-old perspective. Tiana had managed to reassure Emily with words she believed in, words that formed the foundation of her life's work. "I'm okay, Emily. Things will settle down, and together, we'll make sure this brings about the changes we need." Examining her files now, Tiana felt a tightening in her chest, an anticipation tethered to a promise she intended fully to see through. It was never about a singular outcome. Justice was a canvas painted not in sweeping gestures, but in intricate, deliberate strokes. A soft knock interrupted her reverie, drawing her gaze toward the doorway. Sandra Moore, a long-standing colleague and friend, entered without ceremony. The empathy in Sandra's eyes was palpable, a mirror reflecting both personal understanding and professional solidarity. "Tiana," Sandra began, gently shutting the door behind her. "I've been thinking about what all this means, not just for you, but for all of us who've been trying to push the needle in the right direction. How are you holding up?" The question hung in the air, a tender intrusion amid formalities. Tiana sighed, setting aside her papers. "It's overwhelming, Sandra," she admitted, her tone steady but weighted with an honesty reserved for trusted ears. "But in a way, it's affirming. This is exactly why I've dedicated my life to this path, to ensure that justice is more than just a word we echo in courtrooms." Sandra nodded, features softening into a smile of genuine respect. "You're doing important work, Tiana. This incident, as painful as it is, has ripped the veil off for many. They can no longer pretend it's someone else's problem." The affirmation bolstered Tiana's resolve, igniting within her the imperative to channel advocacy through action, a mantle she'd inherited by circumstance but embraced with full intent. Knowledge, experience, influence, each was a tool she would sharpen against the backdrop of this public interest. Their conversation drifted toward strategy, dissecting the rippling implications now encroaching on their courtroom proceedings. The balance of impartiality and compassion had never been more pivotal, nor the importance of judiciary influences more pressing. Together, Tiana and Sandra delved into provisions for community engagement forums where the lay public could interact with representatives of the judicial system, a bridge they hoped over troubled waters and toward a horizon of mutual understanding. The lines between private trials and public spectacles blurred, threading through Tiana's consciousness like a melody begging resolution. Outside, the city pulsed with stories and voices merging into abstract symphony, a testament to the unity beneath its fractured facade. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her chambers, the lingering glow of sunset painted her desk a rich amber. Tiana allowed herself a moment of introspection, a solitary whisper amid the rush of her internal symphonic dance. A warmth surged through her, a gentle accompaniment to resolve, and with it, an unspoken promise echoed through the coming twilight. This struggle was transformative, a crucible of change that forged strength from necessity, drawing inspiration from roots intertwined through legacy and future lineage. In that silence, she envisioned pathways converging, her identity as a judge, mother, and woman of color cemented within her duality of purpose. This wasn't solely her fight. It was an ensemble, each part vital, each voice resounding with the persistent rhythm of hope and unyielding pursuit of justice. The rally had surged into the heart of the city, each step an echo of defiance reverberating against the steel and glass giants towering above. Beneath these skyscrapers, a vibrant tapestry unfurled, its threads woven from countless conversations, open palms raised in solidarity, and eyes reflecting an insatiable hunger for change. Community leaders, who'd long shouldered the burden of advocacy, thrummed with renewed vigor. Among them, Lamar Jenkins, a storied activist whose roots in organizing ran deep, led the charge with an electric presence that drew onlookers like moths to a flame. His hand clasped the bullhorn, voice reverberating as it cut through the harmonic, unified chants. Today we stand united not just because of what happened to Judge Coleman, but for every unrecorded injustice that has chipped away at our dignity, Lamar declared, his words carried aloft by the chilled March wind. We will rise out of silence and compel this city to listen, to act. It's time for action, not just words. His voice, tinged with determination, shift the atmosphere from moments of individual rectitude to a shared crusade for sweeping reform, a calling card for cohesion amid socio-political strife. The assembly hailed from far and wide, a cross-section of civil society converging at a pivotal crux. Teachers, nurses, students, laborers, every representative spirit demanded an irresistible surge towards accountability. In the crowd, a young man named Jamal, his hoodie emblazoned with a vivid image of a clenched fist, turned to the woman next to him. "Ain't it something how we all come together, Miss Ruby? It could have been any of us, but it took a judge to get him looking our way." Miss Ruby, a septuagenarian whose strides were measured but whose spirit remained indomitable, chuckled softly, her gaze resting on the youth before her. "One step at a time, Jamal. We're making them see bit by bit, and that's what matters. Stand tall, stay loud, that's your legacy." Inspired by their shared purpose, the march progressed towards the City Hall steps, where makeshift podiums welcomed voices poised to shatter systemic inertia with piercing clarity. Lamar's speech was a masterstroke of incitement, but it was followed by a succession of testimonies that deepened the resonation. Each speaker harnessed the mic like a lifeline extended across generations. Professors discoursed on collective memory. Lawyers pledged allegiance to reform. From nearby, members of Tiana's extended community flanked the stage, reinvigorating the concept of neighbors helping neighbors, a unity foundational to forging paths through adversity. Amid these rippling declarations of justice, young activists hoisted placards with mottos: "No peace without justice," "End systemic racism," and "Reform for all, not just the privileged." The continual march echoed with music, a drummer set the beat, each hit came through like a heart-thrumming persistence, buoying spirits even as the shadows lengthened. Amid the throng, Tiana moved with Sandra beside her, their formal attire replaced by the casual warmth of lived empathy. They navigated conversations peppered by gratitude and determination, Paul Revere citizens upon convergence, echoing the vital necessity of their reforms. Tiana was approached often, words of thanks accompanying questions about future measures and tensions to steady the incremental voyage of progression, now outranking her judicial role in pressing importance. Each encounter fueled her dedication, ensuring her constant retuning for the communal note, yet to crescendo. The socio-political fabric within this makeshift agora bore the threads of resilience. New alliances took root, advocates bridging differences through the shared conviction, searing into every heartstring, bonded within the crucible of upheaval. As evening fell, candles flickered into existence, light swallowed into a deepening indigo sky above. The transformation was ethereal, a mysticism rendered stark against the drumming rhythm of a city awake to its promise. Tiana paused, surveying this emergent beacon of unity with Sandra at her side, allowing the sheer magnitude to wash over her. "This is bigger than any single case," she murmured, voice mingling with the evening air, a harbinger of hope carried outward from their assembly, marbled into the porcelain twilight. Sandra, soft eyes observing the convergence like a tapestry, replied with unguarded sincerity, "It's our new beginning. The birth of righteous change ensconced in our raising voices." In that tableau, a symphony of fellowship and fierce determination, it became unmistakable that the path forward was infallibly illuminated by their collective wills. Injustice had borne its face, and their shared answer would be the might and measure of conscious solidarity and the relentless pursuit of a justice concept not only lived, but thrived, an ideal stitched indelibly within the complicated beauty of human tapestry. Long before Judge Tiana Coleman found herself thrust into the public eye, her path had been one marked by trials and tribulations that fortified her resolve against the tide of prejudice and systemic bias. Today, amidst the fervor swirling around her, these memories resurfaced, carrying with them both the weight of past battles and the light of hard-won triumphs. As a child, the world had often seemed skewed, its scales tipped unfairly by circumstances beyond her control. Her mother, a pillar of quiet strength, had shielded her from the harshest realities, yet even her nurturing couldn't obscure the whispers of injustice that floated through their neighborhood like autumn's fallen leaves. Tiana remembered vividly a day from her youth, standing at the bus stop while clutching her school books, the harsh words from a passerby still echoing in her ears, "You people don't belong here." At the time, confusion had clouded her understanding, though the truth had sharpened over the years with each unsettling encounter, honing an inner clarity forged through resilience. Now those whispers manifested as roaring calls for change, the echoes of her past merging with the present in a symphony determined not to falter. She often drew from these reflections, knowing the shadows cast by previous adversities formed the outlines of the strength she wielded today. Her father, a devout man who'd worked tirelessly in a factory, had taught her the value of persistence, the lessons embedded within his rough workman's hands that cradled her own on long walks home. "Darkness only makes the stars more vivid," he'd frequently muse, the wisdom etched into her conscience, serving as her north star through moments of doubt. Years later, the oppressive sense of oil and sweat from her homeland gave way to the polished halls of academia. As she entered law school, the journey was marked by its own hurdles. Being a woman, especially one of color, in a predominantly white institution, was a singularly trying gauntlet. The faint echoes of racial slights and marginalizations interlaced with her studies, demanding they be transformed into fuel for the fire of her legal pursuits. One professor stood out among the rest, Professor Hamilton, a mentor with a reputation for challenging students to think beyond traditional boundaries. In him, she found a scholarly kindred spirit, someone who saw potential not just in her intellect, but in her capacity to innovate the systems she studied. "Always remember, Tiana," Hamilton had advised during one of their discussions in his book-lined office, "your voice is unique and necessary. Don't let others dictate its efficacy. Every new decision you render is a chance to bend the arc of the moral universe further toward justice." These words resonated within her long after she graduated, stirring resolve from the embers of her own determination. Each court case she handled as a young attorney was viewed through this prism, and gradually, piece by piece, her reputation for compassionate justice and unyielding fairness blossomed. The portrait of Tiana's life was illustrative of an unbroken resolve, a weaving of challenges met head-on, transformed into victories amid landscapes often splashed with disparity. On this present day, as the echoes of the rally faded into a quiet dusk, Tiana stood on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the city, reflecting on the myriad pathways that had converged upon this point. Her gaze moved skyward, tracing constellations that had borne witness to her ancestors' trials long before she walked this earth. The turbulent path had also sculpted her humility, reminding her consistently that intrinsic worth was a shared humanity inherent in every soul. Successes would be meaningless without building bridges for others. These reflections cast her mission in gossamer threads of legacy, a legacy she was determined to expand, widening its embrace to encompass the community she cherished so deeply. Underneath the veneer of judicial process and nuanced legalese lay an abiding beat one of progress, empathy, and an egalitarian march toward justice. Inside, the thrum of her phone vibrating against the kitchen counter drew her back from the edge of contemplation. Messages continued to flood in from allies, peers, and well-wishers, each declaring their solidarity, each a testament to the narrative becoming ever more collective, each a heartbeat within the larger human condition's sound. As Tiana pensively responded to messages, a surge of warmth encased her determination. She saw the future not simply as a place to arrive at, but as a canvas to paint in hues forged from shared struggle and shared hope. In this moment, standing illuminated by moonlight filtered through city haze, Tiana recognized a new narrative within her story, an evolving script of promise penned in resilience, its fruition guided by the profound interconnectedness of all seeking justice and equality. The woman, the judge parts of a larger whole, responded not only to duty, but to humanity's clarion call. The inquiry into Officer Reynolds' professional conduct, initiated swiftly on the heels of public outrage, unfolded like a slow, methodical peeling of layers that had long masked the injustices within the precinct. The internal investigation had released the hounds. Every file, every complaint previously silenced or ignored, was now subject to uncompromising scrutiny. Inside the sunlit investigation room, stifled by the oppressive weight of a fan overhead and murmurings of tension, Captain Evelyn Norris sat before a table strewn with dossiers like a battlefield map. Her presence carried the burden of recent revelations, the discovery of a troubling pattern that began to emerge with each scrutinized page. Sitting across from her, Detective Lisa Tran provided support, her methodical approach and keen attention to detail proving invaluable. Lisa's notes lined tabbed notebooks, and her laptop screen flickered with digital records revealing a significant number of red flags. "Let's start with the early complaints," Norris instructed, pushing forward several thin folders. Her voice was as calm and purposeful as a surgeon's hands during intricate operation, for they were dissecting nothing less serious than institutional pathology. Lisa opened the first folder, her expression hardening as she reviewed its contents. Officers from Reynolds' shift filed multiple use-of-force incidents over the last year. No formal charges ever brought against him. Victims expressed fear of retaliation, stating general mistrust in the process. "It's all documented here." Norris listened intently, the weight of a thickly knitted brow betraying her consternation. "Why wasn't this escalated?" she asked, although the answer hung tangibly in the room, understood yet unspoken. "A culture of negligence and shielding," Lisa replied, tone reflective of her own cynicism, born from facing bureaucratic apathy in her tenure. Previously, oversight was functional and title only. A code of silence persists, but it's crumbling under public scrutiny. Resolute, Norris gave a sharp nod, sanctioning Lisa to continue unveiling each layer schematically. A timeline of infractions lay before them. Scrapes dismissed as misjudgments, blame shifted with administrative deftness until the constructs of accountability warped entirely. Lisa delved further, her voice steady. Witness statements corroborate a pattern, a progression toward harsher measures as friction outside the badge escalated. There are mentions of derogatory comments, probable cause stretched thin, each incident compounding the last in a concerning trajectory. The captain nodded gravely, an unspoken unity affirming the deadly spiral they stood charged to halt. Root shock and complicit enablement stretched across internal pages detailing unchecked authority. Deep systemic flaws cast shadows far beyond this singular officer, but exposure promised a tidal change. "This can't continue," Norris murmured, more to herself, though Lisa's agreement was palpable. It was their march toward a hard-won renaissance, born from unraveling the bitter threads clinging to law enforcement's image. "Every complaint filed," Lisa continued, "no longer shunted into obscurity. We need credible whistleblower protections, fully realized, and an overhaul of accountability protocols that run the gamut from rank and file to senior leadership." Momentum behind their inquiry represented a nascent shift, symbolized further when Captain Norris spoke aloud, the shared vow binding their silent pact. "We're not just fixing Reynolds, we're reforming the precinct." Their examination was relentless, unyielding, each step peeling back anesthesia until raw truths gasped for candor. Norris reconciled each finding against the promise of public service, a vocation intoned through her hands when they pledged her badge, now tarnished but not irreparable. She envisioned a department stripped of insidious vestiges layered over decades, a vision aligned with community trust rebuilt not through symbols but through meaningful acts embedded in policy. Outside the investigation room's confines, the station moved with usual frequencies of citizen engagement and enforcement rituals, but beneath the ordinariness lay combined whispers of reform, a muscular advocacy compelling confessions to see light. The tide changing affirmed Norris's private resolution to excise rot with surgical precision. Capturing this singular moment in time was an occasionally solitary endeavor, yet one illuminated by the knowledge of unified efforts vital for lasting change. The exhaustive chronicle continued late into the afternoon before Norris and Lisa paused, finally, the room sighing with their relief as the day's light dwindled into evening hues bathing their workspace. "This," Norris stated, lifting a final file to the surface like surfacing a pearl from hard bedrock, "could be the turning point." "Our turning point," Lisa echoed, capturing the essence of mutual belief come figured resolve, writing an unsent epistle in the footnotes of their collective script. Navigating within paradigms of justice and reform, the peelback replaced silence with amplified truths, inching truth resolution forward into the anticipatory dawn of redemptive work in its wake. A legacy for impartiality, restored by their hands, guided by remembrance of transgressions, extinguished by accountability's unwavering light. As the investigation into Officer Reynolds gathered momentum, its scope extended far beyond his immediate actions on that fateful day. It became a conduit for broader introspection within the precinct, a reluctant dance over coals that forced systemic examination into entrenched cycles of misconduct and complicity. With each new revelation, a web of silent enablers emerged, their roles in perpetuating an unaccountable culture unraveled with painstaking care. The precinct, usually a fortress of camaraderie fortified by unwritten codes, found itself under siege not only by public scrutiny, but by the ghosts of ignored injustices now clamoring for recognition. Interrogations and internal reviews entwined officers in a narrative that demanded uncomfortable truths be laid bare. Each badge carried stories, some noble, others less so, hidden transcripts of inaction and passive assent, now etched into the unfolding dialogue that compelled institutional introspection. Captain Evelyn Norris had become the linchpin for these proceedings, her resolve energizing careful excavation of a department's moral compass. She understood with profound clarity that justice was not served in singular acts, but rather sculpted through collective will. It was this narrative she adopted while engaging teams of officers now grappling with the inquiry's wake. As the sun dipped below the cityscape one evening, a meeting was convened in a stark, featureless room within the precinct's innermost sanctum. Present were not only commanding officers, but representatives from each division. Chairs encircled a central table where Norris presided, her steely gaze a lighthouse in their stormy milieu. "We're here to confront something long overdue," she began, voice devoid of pretension. "Each of us holds pieces to a larger story, one fraught with our shared responsibility, and one we must bravely contend with." Her words surged with weight, resonant with the timbre of urgency. Around the table, faces varied in expression, from hardened skepticism to cautious optimism, each reflecting an individual reckoning. Detective Mark Hansen, an officer with 2 decades in blue, broke the silence first. "Captain, we've always relied on tradition, unwritten understandings. It's hard to question what has seemingly kept us together." Norris met his gaze squarely and replied, "Traditions that enable harm aren't roots, they shackles. We must distinguish a code of ethics from a chain of complicity." The candor between Norris and Hansen shifted dynamics visibly. Officers exchanged glances tinged with readiness to breach silence, a silent consensus, awaiting catalyst dialogue. Sergeant Ann Monroe, known for a deep commitment to community engagement, spoke next, Her tone carried the tenderness of confessed recognition. We all know of times when we felt something wasn't right, but most of us dismissed it, thinking it wasn't our place. Now seems the time to ensure it is. The ripples set forth by her confession brushed against the room, dislodging whispers, coaxing them into audible accounts as the precinct collectively exhaled its burden. Conversations braided stories into a spectrum where acknowledgement became antidote. Ice cracked upon the thaw of silence. Reynold's superior, Lieutenant Harry Stokes, leaned forward, hands clasped, a gesture depicting deferral to a larger truth. I advised Gary told him of complaints, but they were buried under procedural quagmire. The responsibility was mine as well, and I failed it. Admissions like Stokes's became refrain, each one dimming darkness to allow transparency's light through. It paved the way for understanding, fragmented pasts reconstructed not only for accountability, but rejuvenation. Every officer here is capable of extraordinary service, Norris affirmed, bolstered by the openness shared. Our task is to make sure nothing compromises that potential, nothing that derails integrity. It's not negotiable. Inspired by dialogue gaining momentum, their meeting transitioned toward cooperative strategies, mentorship programs for new recruits, and a new internal affairs policy that encouraged transparency with imbued safeguards. By the meeting's close, a shift was undeniable. Old guards shifted on axes of renewal, commitment to progressing a precinct poised for overcoming inertia against reform. Out in the streets, lit by cooling twilight, the heartbeat of a community echoed change, ascending to heights from foundations laid bare and rebuilt not by singular entities, but the spectral fusion of varied lives, each voice like that of melting snow birthing rivers. Officer Reynolds, though central to the unfolding inquiry, was symbolic of a larger narrative, a touchstone evoking a more prominent story demanding collective authorship. It was his and every officer's task to bear the flame of reform, and in the fire kindled by ethical flame, new beginnings would rise, phoenix-like, shaped by hands willing to carry not just duty's weight, but justice's promise. Hope, no longer whisper, flourished within incandescent tongues of resolve, heralding a precinct reborn from truth's intonating cries. As city lights twinkled awake to starlit canopy, the chapter for renewal consecrated paths forged within the ethos of shared humanity, prismed reflections igniting paths toward rightful evolution. In the resounding aftermath of the rally, legal ecosystems vibrated with an urgency and fervor that reflected the winds of change billowing through communities and courthouses alike. Not merely a ripple, the incident had sparked a tidal wave of advocacy, attracting titans of civil rights law who saw in Judge Tiana Coleman's case an opportunity to catalyze systemic reform. Amidst this groundswell emerged Adrian Stone, a formidable civil rights lawyer whose career had been dedicated to illuminating the shadows of prejudice and injustice that tainted systems nationwide. Her name was synonymous with landmark victories, each case an incremental push toward equity. To have Adrian extend her prowess was to invite a maelstrom of strategic brilliance cornered by an unyielding push against societal inertia. When Tiana received the call from Adrian, the conversation was brief yet penetrating, both understanding the depth of the challenge before them. "Tiana," Adrian began, her voice a rich melody imbued with determination, "what happened to you stands as a testament to the systemic failings we've witnessed plaguing our nation for too long. Let us transform this incident from a single flame into an inferno of reform." Tiana's response, layered with grit, resonated in its simplicity. "I've always believed justice is a mosaic of collective voices. Your expertise can transform our efforts into lasting change. Adrienne, let's do this." Their coalition swiftly broadened as more legal luminaries lent their expertise, hearts, and agile minds to the cause. Stephen Morris, already invested in Tiana's battle, meshed seamlessly with Adrienne. Together, their collective narrative outlined not just a defensive strategy, but a proactive vision designed to puncture systemic malaise at its root. The strategy was multifaceted: compel legislative reform, bolster community-centric safeguards, and harness litigation as both shield and scalpel. Each component was aligned with a singular purpose, embedding accountability and justice into the precincts of power. In a sunlit conference room overlooking a bustling street below, these champions huddled around a table scattered with documents and annotated briefs, framing a blueprint they hoped would become viral across legal domains. Adrienne led the charge, her poise commanding yet inviting, conscious of weaving each voice into a tapestry of formidable unity. "Our objectives must extend beyond individual redress," she stated, feeding into the collective vision. "We need comprehensive policy shifts at the municipal level, dog-like transmuted into directives that cities across the country can replicate." Her words set the trajectory, as discussions pivoted from immediate litigation necessities to innovative legal precedents. They debated approaches to border the thin wires threading responsibility with reform. Each phrase hung tinged with the power to stun oppressors into abject stillness. Stephen, hands curled around the edge of the table in symbolic sincerity, contributed, "If policy is a game of inches, our leverage must be weighty enough to shift public opinion, to challenge business as usual within the precinct and beyond." Onlookers from diverse organizations took note, each institutional pillar represented amidst their conclave, adding strength to collective action. Consciousness unfurled, binding them not just by intent, but necessity. A reaction, birthing evolution, stretching equity's expanse. "Let's organize a summit that brings together local officials and citizens," Adrienne proposed, pen poised skillfully against legal parchment. "Include role models from effective oversight committees nationwide. Turn inspiration into active legislation." The room nodded in consensus action and realization. Twin aspects of an updated paradigm spelled out conclusively within their strategy. Each lawyer present recognized the precedent this case could set, each embrace of reform holding promise to be a benchmark emblematic of civil liberties extended. Hours of strategy sessions passed like minutes, motion fueled by an urgent yearning nestled at Justice's heart. As the meeting concluded, Tiana stood quietly for a moment, taking in their gathered force for true transformation. She felt humbled by the expertise surrounding her, yet invigorated with resolve, a duality uniting the importance of her role. Together with Adrienne, Stephen, and their council comrades, Tiana transformed the room itself into a crucible, a ground for alloying action with empathy, and in time, remaking legal arenas into bastions no longer susceptible to corrosion's stealth. They departed armed with agreement, their departure amplified by hopes set astir in depths of soul. Throughout the city, the journey they contemplated extended, scope compelling hearts and minds to lean into paths only wellness sanctioned by mutual humanity would trot upon. The strategy crystallized in ivory halls reflected transformative momentum as cityscapes blinked midnight quiet unto tomorrow's brimming dawn, where law and justice intertwined. As the momentum of the legal campaign gathered steam, Tiana Coleman found herself navigating the turbulent confluence of her personal and professional life. The intersection of these spheres was not a new experience per se, but never before had they collided with such intensity and public attention. Her family became both refuge and crucible, a place where strength mustered amidst vulnerability, and support braided endless threads knitting resilience within their unity. In their modest but warm home, the television hummed quietly in the background, perpetually tuned to channels dissecting the incident and its aftermath. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the walls in hues of fading amber, Tiana found herself at the kitchen table, enveloped in the precious mundanity of family life. Her husband, Michael, a tall, sturdy pillar of consistent support, was finishing up dinner preparations, the comforting aroma of marinara sauce filling the air. "Have you eaten yet?" Michael inquired, dividing his attention between Tiana and the pasta simmering on the stove. His eyes, usually a calm ocean, now held shadows of concern, interwoven with pride. "Not yet," Tiana replied, setting aside the legal briefs she'd brought home, that now lay scattered across the table's surface like islands in a sea of strategy. "But I'm starving, and this smells amazing." Michael smiled, the gesture warmly reassuring, and labeled 2 servings onto plates, setting one before her. "You've been through the ringer these past few weeks. I'm proud of you. You're holding up incredible grace under all this pressure." Tiana reached out, clasping his hand, seeking solace in his strength. "I don't think I could do it without you all beside me," she admitted softly, her voice carrying the weight of complete sincerity. "Every day feels like a battle, and I'm constantly reminded of what's at stake, not just for us, but for everyone watching." Their children, Emily and Jason, echoed her sentiment through expressions of determined hope, woven with shared responsibility for activism within their generation's paradigms. At 16 and 14, they observed this unfolding chapter with a maturity etched intricately by their unique perspective. As they all gathered for dinner, Emily, keenly aware of her role as both spectator and participant, spoke up. "Mom, people at school are talking about you, about everything that's happening. Even my teachers are bringing it up in class discussions. It's surreal," Jason chimed in, youthful humor anchoring vulnerability. "Yeah, some kids are even making memes, Mom, about justice and stuff. It's wild." Their laughter, accompanied by a gentle ripple of familial love, warmed the room, a sanctuary against the storms outside. Moments like these reminded Tiana of the purpose behind her tireless advocacy. The students, the community, her children, they exemplified the future she fought to mold, carry it forward free of shadows. In their presence, she felt discernible clarity, each shared meal and conversation punctuated by progress, birthing dreams where justice was transparent and durable, a living truth not yet fully realized but undeniably aspired toward. The evening wore on, each story shared around their table, fostering renewed hope, weaving threads of resolve tighter. Michael encouraged their exchange, allowing an effortless flow of ideas and collaboration, nurturing aspirations with pragmatic wisdom. As dessert was served, Tiana paused, contemplating for a moment the magnitude of their collective journey, a vision enriched by individual spirits interconnecting their mission with enduring legacy. "Remember," she urged, looking to Emily and Jason with all the gravity of her role as a mother and catalyst, "being part of change isn't about being perfect. It's about striving to do what's right. Even small steps illuminate paths for others to follow." Her words settled amidst their gathering warmth, a verbal bedrock sustaining endeavors yet to arrive at full fruition. Eyes met with understanding, acknowledging the vital narrative her family embraced. A narrative destined for chapters continuing beyond present trials. The night drew to a close, moonlight stitching silhouettes against the backdrop of hopes stirring just beneath the surface. Within these walls, acts of strengthening their bond found deeper meaning, preparing this family for the dawn of a new day brimming over with infinite possibility. As Tiana retired for the evening, her heart, though heavy with responsibility, found solace in whispered assurances, the foundations of familial love and conviction fortressed against any gale, heralding tomorrow's promising renewal. Beneath the canopy of their shared dreams, fate unwound its arch intent, engaging futures bound with the extraordinary yet to be, drawing forth transformations endlessly worthy of the fight bound within each steadfast soul. From their nucleus outward, the quest for assurance emboldened within an unparalleled symphony, a testament to all peacekeepers striving for a just present, dancing within the tapestry of an aspired yesterday, realized unto the morrow. The precinct's walls echoed with a restless tension that seemed to have seeped into the very foundation, charged by the thunderous footsteps of officers grappling with their roles in the unfolding drama. Tiana's case had catalyzed a fracture in the status quo, compelling those within the force to reevaluate their conscience and commitment to justice. Amidst this setting, 2 officers found themselves ensnared in a quiet dilemma, one that juxtaposed the ingrained loyalties of their badge against the glaring illumination of moral truth. Officer Ben Hardy, a seasoned cop known for his steadfast adherence to duty, sat across from his partner, Mei Lin. Both were seasoned, respected within the ranks, yet now burdened with the discoveries unraveling within their precinct's halls. Their conversation was tones above a whisper, confined to the shadows lining the break room, a space not quite immune to the turmoil outside. The day's weight bore heavily on their shoulders, neither willing to shy from the conflicted reality they found themselves in. "Do you ever wonder what we're really protecting?" May began, the words heavy as her voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Her eyes were locked onto the wall-mounted TV, which played yet another news segment on Tiana's ordeal. Ben, his expression thoughtful yet conflicted, stayed silent for a moment, the pause pregnant with contemplation. "Every damn day," he finally admitted, his voice a low rumble of sincerity. "More so now. I keep thinking about how we could have done more. Grasped the cues before the storm hit us." The corner of May's lips curled upward, not in mockery but in solidarity, an acknowledgement of their shared unease. Over time, unspoken truths had collected dust, some of which might have been brushed under a once unquestioned rug, now flipped open for scrutiny. "We've both put a lot into this job," May continued, eyes shifting to meet Ben's. "But if we leave things as they are, what's the point of continuing? There has to be more than just surviving the shift and going home." It was a question that lingered like smoke, coiling around their sense of duty and challenging the very fibers of their self-worth. The bonds forged in service rendered their hesitation tangible as they wrestled with vulnerability's pull against institutional allegiance. Their hesitation stemmed not from a lack of resolve, but from the trepidation of stepping into uncharted waters, of potentially alienating themselves from an identity rooted within uniformed fidelity. Ben's fingers tapped absent-mindedly on the table, each movement telegraphing the complex intersection of thought and instinct. "Maybe it's up to us to change it from the inside, to make sure the right voices are heard," he proposed, a whisper of defiance coloring his tone. Their gaze locked, understanding passing through the tendrils of shared awareness, a dialogue of muted voices intertwining within silence's cadence. It was an invitation toward action, a mutual leap into the churning uncertainty swirling around them. "The investigation is peeling back layers never meant to be revealed," May said softly, a tone underscored by layers of thought. "But it's also an opportunity to shape what comes next. This time, maybe we can be the difference." Excitement, edged with caution, settled between them. A silent pact formed amidst unwritten lines as the siren outside wailed like a distant call, carrying within it the need for resolution. The discourse between these officers was a microcosm of broader shifts resonating through the city. It illustrated a deeply personal evolution, a reconciliation with the fading echo of ignorance and complicity in pursuit of a more inclusive truth. As they exited the hushed shadows of the break room, Ben and May carried with them a renewed understanding that real power lay not in weaponed exploits but in the conviction of action. Each new step a part of the evolving narrative. Amidst the precinct awakening to its own complexities, the two officers joined the intersectional discourse not just as participants but as architects. Their journey was set within the larger mosaic of justice, woven anew with threads of courage and vulnerability, a testament to change pursued not from personal gain but a genuine call for equitable reform. Meanwhile, as the city outside continued to pulse with life, heralding change through whispered narratives knit together with hope, Ben and May knew their path was indelibly linked to the inaugural steps taken by all those who dared traverse the daunting terrain of authenticity. Together, they sought to ensure that justice's legacy, often frayed by bureaucracy's weight, would instead become a beacon illuminating the human consciousness, a testament to the luminous horizon sprawling just beyond the past. The day of reckoning arrived like an auburn dawn, cracking the sky over Chicago, a prelude to the courtroom drama poised to unfold within the hallowed halls of justice. It was a day brimming with anticipation, tension curling around the pillars of the courthouse like smoke around a flame. Inside, the air was thick with expectation, every seat filled by those who had come to witness the unfolding of what would become a landmark case. Reporters jostled for prime vantage points, their cameras poised like hawks ready to capture the pivotal moments that would shape public discourse. At the center of this storm stood Tiana Coleman, poised and dignified, a commanding presence that lent gravity to the proceedings. Her attire, a dark blue suit, mirrored the unwavering resolve that had carried her through the tumultuous weeks of preparation leading up to this moment. As she took her place, the gallery's murmur subsided, an almost tangible hush enveloping the room as the realization of history in the making settled bone deep in every observer present. At the prosecution table sat Adrienne Stone, her command of the room rivaled only by the ferocity of her intellect. She shuffled through her notes with a deliberate calm, the immensity of the task echoing silently through her practiced hands. Alongside her, Stephen Morris nodded reassuringly, silently affirming their unified mission. To his credit, Gary Reynolds exuded an air of contrition. Seated beside his defense attorney, who wore an expression of grim resignation, Reynolds appeared a man dimly aware of the monumental undertaking now juxtaposed against his dwindling authority. His demeanor lacked the bravado once so evident, replaced by a somberness that bordered on defeat. "Court is now in session," the clerk announced, the gavel striking rhythmically on mahogany, a percussive underscore to the emergent drama. Judge Horowitz, an elder statesman cut from the cloth of fairness and justice, presided with a critical eye. He scrutinized the courtroom's assemblage, his gaze embodying the judiciary's commitment to fairness and equity, tempered by the human complexities inherent in every case. Laying the groundwork succinctly, Adrienne rose, her voice resonant with conviction. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are assembled today not merely to hear testimony, but to rectify a grave misappropriation of power, a breach that symbolizes much of what must be unspooled from within our systems. Every word, every pause, precisely calibrated to imbue the narrative with its moral weight. Evidence and testimonies, once whispers only, were poised to be magnified under the harsh scrutiny of the public gaze. As proceedings flowed, witnesses were called to testify, each narrative sketching a vivid tapestry of habitual conduct and unchecked bias within the police ranks. Testimonies painted a poignant portrait of Reynolds' pattern of behavior unfurled against a backdrop of systemic oversight, creating a narrative so familiar yet stark in its undeniable urgency. Detective Lisa Tran, profound in her delivery, took the stand, carrying with her the weight of a reconciliation that spoke to the necessity of reform throughout their department. "We failed not just Tiana Coleman, Your Honor, but every citizen who expects justice to reign equal." The gallery absorbed each revelation, shifting uncomfortably in seats shaped by decades of passive acknowledgement. And yet, with each increment of truth unearthed, glances were exchanged that promised something revolutionary, a shared consensus to enact bygone accountability. When Tiana herself took the stand, the silence intensified, a collective breath held taut throughout her testimony. Her words were meticulously chosen, painting stark contrasts between personal affront and the universal demand for justice. "Authority," she articulated, her voice a clarion call that reached into the halls with unwavering clarity, "is vested not just in the uniforms we don't, but in how we choose to wield it. This trial is not solely about a singular act of aggression, but about redefining accountability at every level." Her testimony was a symbiotic interplay of personal strength and communal necessity, creating a connective tissue of purpose that resonated powerfully with every individual present, a momentum propelling justice forward beyond solitary recompense. Each statement dissolved the boundaries distinguishing onlookers from participants, weaving an intricate fabric of shared experience from strands of responsibility and an unceasing quest for fairness. Reynolds' defense, crafted delicately yet lacking the fortitude of truth, sought to navigate murky waters, riding on well-trodden excuses familiar to those versed in systemic deference. His lawyer's arguments sought to undercut the mountain of testimony, relying on procedural missteps and gaps in training to deflect culpability. Yet, with every counterpoint raised, the prosecution's masterful assembly of evidence and dialogue served to augment the stark realities laid bare. As the day progressed and the closing statements loomed near, the courtroom felt a palpable shift, a recognition that this trial was symbolic, not solely a judgment of guilt or innocence, but as a mandate for radical transformation. The gavel descended again, fulfilling yet another operative function, sealing the proceedings until the resumption of court at a later date. But in its wake remained an echo, a resonant reminder of the unbridled potential permeating the inevitable course of reform. From that courtroom's rarefied air sprung myriad intimations, a kaleidoscope of foreseeable change darting into the past, present, and future. It was beyond a trial. It was a stand for dignity, a stand for justice, a stand for tomorrow. Within the courtroom, beneath city's enduring fog, a chorus, resilient as it was resolute, demanded trajectory to justice fully realized. As the courtroom filled once more with anticipation's hush, the final day of testimony opened with an air both solemn and charged. The jury had taken their seats, and the delicate web of justice, stretched taut by the proceedings, was poised to reveal its verdict. The spotlight fell upon those whose voices held the power to affirm or alter the trajectory set by the opening days of the trial. The atmosphere vibrated with the expectation that something significant was about to unfold. A crescendo reached after weeks of painstaking buildup. Witness after witness had painted a portrait of a culture mired in systemic oversight, but it was today's testifiers, those who defied fear to bring forth their truths, that would cement these narratives into the solid bedrock of change. As the first witness of the day was called, an electric charge coursed through the room. He was Julian Porter, a young activist whose encounters with law enforcement had left indelible marks upon him. His entry to the stand was met with keen attention, his reputation as a potent community voice preceding him. "Mr. Porter," Adrienne Stone began, her voice a compass guiding the courtroom through the forest of evidence, "can you tell us about your experiences and how they relate to the events we're examining today?" Julian's eyes swept the room, his gaze landing on the jurors, drawing them into his narrative, stitch by intricate stitch. "From a young age," he started, his voice unwavering, "I learned to navigate the tightrope of respect and fear, a balance dictated by authority's perception." His testimony wove lived experience with lucid clarity, personalizing a systemic problem writ large. He recounted stark experiences, unwarranted stops, brusque dismissals, an atmosphere fraught with tension navigated by many but palatable to few. His words carved pathways toward understanding, building empathy one measure at a time within jurors' bounds. Beneath Julian's narrative, the gallery stirred, tokens of acknowledgement spreading as his story echoed facets of their own. His testimony crystallized the pervasive nature of issues circumnavigating the human spirit, bringing an unmistakable urgency that thrummed against the courtroom's steely facade. As the session progressed, more voices emerged from the shadows, a series of testimonies like compelling symphonies. Each revealed their experiences: a mother recounting her son's wrongful arrest, a teacher unveiling bias cloaked within security protocol, an elder reminding them of drawn parallels from hard-won civil rights battles. Every account was a stone cast into the rippling pool of societal conscience. The jury absorbed these unyielding truths that transcended mere anecdotes to become part of an overwhelming tide of calls for accountability. Meanwhile, Tiana watched and listened, absorbing each exchange with poised resolve. She saw within these narratives the artistry of an evolving tapestry, voices interwoven with threads of hope crafted from the loom of shared human struggle. With the procession of witnesses complete, the defense mounted its last stand, a faltering tower built on precedents and technical disparities, seeking to absolve Reynolds through the paradigm of misguided intention rather than direct malice. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Reynolds' attorney intoned, drawing every ounce of courtroom drama into a suspended breath, "we acknowledge errors were made, systemic in scope and not the sole purview of a single officer." By contrast, Adrienne's closing was both a plea and a declaration. Her words embraced raw conviction, inviting the jury to anchor promise to change. Justice need never contrast between the privileged and the innocent, nor between protector and persecuted. she implored. Let your judgment align with the path forward to mend, reform, and restore faith in the fabric of impartial governance. When the gavel rang to announce adjournment, the room exhaled together, a shared acknowledgement that the trial had uncovered more than a single officer's actions. It had laid bare an urgent necessity for a transformation transcending miles of bureaucracy. In the silent stirrings of reflection, with the measure of testimony echoing in chambered walls, the jury departed for deliberation. They carried the weight of public expectation, the pulse of reform illuminating future possibilities, rendered tangible by proceedings bled of ignorance and substantiated by truth. As outside the courthouse the crowd gathered, a community invested in the outcome stood resilient, waiting. Through whispers of change to come, Tiana felt the narrative unfurl over the gathered cloud, an unfolding ethos arcing toward transformation, an anthem for justice that demanded unity in its song. Together, in this moment of unspoken resolve, they stood as witnesses to an emancipated horizon one, ushered in not merely by pronouncement but by the soul's renewing pathways into tomorrow, with unbridled courage, entwined in the radiant proclamation of resilience, destined to echo through eternity. The courtroom sat in a ferment of anticipation as Judge Horwitz prepared to resume the session. A palpable tension hung in the air, an electric charge born from the gravity of the moment. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the soft rustle of fabric as the jury filed back into place, their expressions inscrutable, yet heavy with the weight of their impending pronouncement. Tiana Coleman, seated with unyielding poise, steeled herself for the verdict. Her heart was a steady drum in her chest, a rhythm that had seen her through countless ordeals, yet today beat with a heightened intensity. In the gallery, observers leaned forward, expressions a mix of resolve and cautious hope, embodying the collective longing for justice long deferred. When Judge Horowitz spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that filled the room with gentle authority. We are gathered to hear the jury's findings in this case, a case that speaks to not only the events at hand, but to broader issues that touch all of our lives. The foreman of the jury rose, a middle-aged man whose deliberate movements conveyed the struggle of balancing humanity's scales. He glanced at the sheet of paper in his hand, then beyond it, into the faces of those awaiting his words with bated breath. In the matter of Officer Gary Reynolds, we find the defendant guilty as charged, he declared, his voice firm yet reverberating with the significance of their decision. The room remained hushed for a beat, processing the verdict that hung in the air like a tangible entity. Then came the exhalations of pent-up breath from the gallery, a collective release that reverberated through the cavernous space. Tiana closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the moment as the ramifications of justice unfolding around her resonated deeply within. Her resolve had been a beacon throughout this journey, a guidepost for countless others now inspired to champion reform. Reynolds' expression was one of subdued resignation, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of his actions' legal consequences. There was no escaping the harsh light of accountability that bore down on him, a stark lesson written in the ink of regret and societal judgment. For the prosecution team, the victory was bittersweet, a nod towards progress in a larger war that raged within every courtroom where policy and humanity converged at intersectional crossroads. Adrian Stone exchanged a glance with Stephen Morris, their expressions a mix of triumph and this was a win undeniably significant, yet emblematic of a complex landscape where systemic change still demanded perseverance. Judge Horowitz addressed the court with a gravity born from experience, his tone somber, yet infused with hope. Let this verdict be a reminder of our shared responsibility, not just in upholding the letter of the law, but in ensuring that justice, in all its forms, is meted with equity and understanding. As the proceedings wound to a close, Tiana felt a distinct shift, both within the room and beyond its walls, a palpable sense of forward momentum that promised to ripple outward, carried by community voices now invigorated. The whispers of change floated through the air, a sweet symphony that hinted at enduring progress, unburdened by past fears. Outside the courthouse, the scene was one of cathartic celebration, imbued with an undertone of reflection. Activists, supporters, and citizens milled about in patches of sunlight that dotted the courthouse steps, news cameras capturing the jubilant aftermath. Lamar Jenkins, surrounded by fellow advocates, raised his hands high in a gesture encompassing triumph and solidarity. "This is just the beginning," he shouted, his voice crackling with emotion. "Today proves with unity and determination systemic change is possible." Tiana joined the crowd, her presence drawing nods of appreciation and heartfelt congratulations from neighbors and strangers alike. Each gesture, every handshake, carried with it an unspoken bond sewn by shared experience, a tapestry of resilience woven anew within the broader fabric of their social conscience. As she stepped toward her family, Michael pulled her close, their embrace a sanctuary amidst the swirl of voices, a grounding force tethering her to both present reality and future potential. Emily and Jason ran up, their youthful eagerness alight with pride and burgeoning understanding. "Mom, you did it," Emily exclaimed, eyes bright with esteem and promise. Tiana nodded, holding the two close. "We did it," she corrected gently, her voice vibrant with gratitude and encouragement. "This was a collective effort. It couldn't have happened without all of you, this community, and everyone who believes in real justice." United in this moment, the family and their community stood enveloped in the light of change, not just spoken, but actioned. It was a sacred pause, marked by the kind of certainty that binds the past with what is yet to unfold, a shimmering arc of pledged resolve, casting its glow ever forward. In the wake of transition, inaugurated by informed discernment and principled tenacity, Tiana knew with unwavering conviction that the journey begun here would echo onward past courthouse doors, witnessing plates of community discourse, and through halls brightened by the steady refrain of evolutionary justice. As shadows lengthened into gentle evening, painting the city in colors of continued struggle and unyielding progress, she took a deep breath, embraced by the indomitable spirit, rising to meet the dawning horizon of tomorrow. A tomorrow explicitly woven through justice, realigning with humanity's steadfast heart. News of the verdict reverberated far beyond the confines of the courthouse, spreading like wildfire through the avenues of Chicago and beyond. It was a spark that ignited a larger conversation, the kindling of which had long been accumulating beneath layers of societal complacency. The public, impassioned and energized, engaged with a new fervor, and the streets became a stage for dialogue. Each corner, a potential hotspot for change. The verdict had cracked open a door that had been creaking for decades, and now the public rushed through, eager to explore the realms beyond. Across the city, debates flared into workshops and community forums, each gathering a microcosm of the broader societal fabric. There, individuals from all walks of life converged to examine the implications of the trial, laying bare their truths and fears while searching for common ground. In coffee shops and public parks, conversations were animated with an urgency born from realization, a collective acknowledgement that justice, once imperceptibly distant, was now an attainable silhouette on the horizon. The city buzzed with the potential for reform, its heartbeat aligned with the synchronized cadence of a community rallying toward a singular, formidable goal. Tiana Coleman, no longer just a figurehead within the courtroom, was emblematic of this shift in consciousness. Her presence at public events and forums became a beacon of hope and a testament to the change everyone desired but few had dared to envision. Her speaking engagements were marked by patient listening and impassioned dialogue, each word carefully chosen to ignite the flame of collective action without smothering it under the weight of divisive rhetoric. During one such event held at a community center in the South Side, she stood before a packed auditorium, her figure small against the backdrop of the large, echoing hall. As she took the stage, the room fell into a respectful silence, the kind reserved for moments when history peers over the shoulders of those crafting it. "Today marks a pivotal turning point," Tiana began, her voice a resonant anchor amidst the diverse gathering. "Yet the journey toward meaningful reform has only just begun. Our efforts must extend beyond this trial. Each step into tomorrow must reflect our unwavering commitment to equity and justice." Her eyes scanned the audience, meeting familiar and new faces alike, all interwoven by their shared faith in the gathering momentum. There were young activists and seasoned leaders, students and teachers, mothers, workers, and elders, all witnesses to an evolution that called them to action. "We've learned that our strength lies in unity," Gianna continued, her voice amplifying the flux of positive energy that seemed to seep into every corner of the hall. "By listing and uplifting one another, by holding each other accountable, we transcend mere dialogue. We shape our futures collectively." The audience erupted into applause, a wave of sound that reaffirmed their shared vision, rallying cries rising from one end of the room to the other. People clapped hands, nodding in agreement, while whispers of justice floated upon the air like sacred incantations. From the podium, Tiana observed a variety of passionate discussions budding in the crosshatch of energized attention, a mutual recognition that every individual voice contributed to the great symphony of change they were composing together. Lamar Jenkins, whose presence resonated with robust activism, stood among the crowd, seizing upon this inhalation of shared purpose. He thrived in these moments, deftly navigating between clusters of conversations, ensuring connectivity and contemporaneous compliance with the broader agenda, educating, empowering, engaging. Meanwhile, on social media platforms, the discourse morphed into a digital assembly. People worldwide sharing insights, experiences, and aspirations kindled by the precedent set in that courtroom and its subsequent ripples. The verdict was no longer solely a legal conclusion, but a movement, a rallying standard for justice threaded through every tweet, post, and profile. Throughout the city and beyond, the sentiment echoed. No longer a whisper, no longer a ripple. It morphed into a tidal wave of realization that swelled with the buoyant force of change, a harbinger of justice recalibrated by a community's relentless pursuit for ethical truth. As Tiana concluded the gathering, gratitude and conviction gleamed within her countenance. She spoke softly but with firm resolve. "Together, we build bridges, not walls. We construct a tapestry of justice, rich with diversity, each strand a testament to our unwavering bond." Inspired by this resolve, the crowd dispersed into the vivid expanse of an evening mingling with hopeful hues, leaving behind a legacy of determination and freshly minted purpose. As they ventured back into the city's rhythmic embrace, whispers of plans coalesced into structured dialogues. Thus the narrative continued, unwritten but no longer intangible, a story told through community platforms and personal resolve, its reach growing with every new conversation, beating in time with the rhythm of an evolving city and a justice redefined by its people. With renewed determination, Tiana reflected upon this symphony, performed in living color, insistent upon a legacy where justice was not just envisioned but enacted. Each note harmonized by the commitment and unrelenting resolve of all those now empowered to see it through. The courtroom stood stark and solemn, a hive of focused energy as legal minds clashed in a final battle of wits that would not only shape a verdict, but redefine justice itself. The air was taut with anticipation, threaded with the whispers of past testimony and the unsaid weight of societal expectations. Defense and prosecution sat poised for the next phase, eyes keen and measured. Each side bore the indelible imprints of legal skirmish, crafting narratives intended to sway justice rather than compel it. This arena became a crucible, a defining testament to the constant interplay of truth and interpretation. Adrienne Stone came to the fore, her poise notable amidst the charged ambiance. Confidence emanated from her as she gathered herself, gearing up to deliver incisive arguments honed through countless nights of deliberative strategizing. "Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury," she began, her voice a symphony of conviction. Our task is not merely to address an individual's actions, but to contend with the environment that allowed such conduct to flourish unchecked. On the opposite aisle, the defense attorney, Robert Ellis, stood ready to parry her forthcoming oratory with rebuttals polished through deliberation. His approach focused on challenging evidence and weaving a tapestry of extenuating circumstances, seeking not absolution, but empathy pooled from human error. As Adrienne detailed the case's finer threads, her silhouette against the courtroom's grandiose backdrop seemed to encompass both a personal mission and a collective plea. We stand at the cusp of redefining accountability, forging a precedent that protects our communities not just for today, but for subsequent generations. Her words were both bridge and clarion, invoking a duty transcending singular arenas. The call for society's commitment infused into every word spoken. Her voice didn't demand retributive justice, but a recalibration, influenced by broader introspection. Ellis rose with practiced precision, clearing his throat as he maneuvered within the emotional complexity layered over perception. Of the actions in question are inexcusable. They are symptomatic of broader social dilemmas that require consideration and understanding. Officer Reynolds, like any of us, is beholden to structures not designed by an individual hand. His words aimed for the delicate balance between deflection and illumination, seeking soft spots within the resistive armor of accountability. He portrayed Reynolds within the crucible of systemic pressure, an individual juxtaposed against larger failings. As the discourse flowed, a hymn of argumentation steeped with nuance, the jury remained visibly intent, minds absorbing not just the content, but the profundity of the truths folded into the layers before them. They appraised each testimony, each argument, with an understanding that surpassed mere judgment, probing the core of ethical consequence. The testimony of experts provided clarity amid complexity. They deconstructed policy and practice, exploring the confluence of factors that led to Tiana's ordeal. They spoke to the psychology of power dynamics, implicit bias, and the undeniable impact of institutional neglect. Experts like Dr. Helena Grant, an esteemed social psychologist, elucidated the effects of unchecked systemic biases infiltrating daily interactions, forming invisible chains binding everyone within the justice system. These incidents are not isolated mishaps, but cumulative ripples within a stagnant pond that demand movement toward reform, she articulated, her words a beacon, drawing attention to subterranean currents, unveiling the societal ethos. As each layer of testimony was laid bare, they wove a compelling narrative, one that demanded reflection beyond the confines of the courtroom, resonating with the citizens' yearning for clarity and reform. In this courtroom, justice was no longer shrouded in ambiguity or archaic rhetoric. Here, it took form through technological displays capturing data, analytics, graphs projecting disparate realities of racial imbalance, and narratives that surpassed individual guilt, seeking societal renewal. The dance of testimony and argumentation reached its penultimate step as the day slowly approached its end. As proceedings adjourned, fatigue lined both sides of the aisle. Yet among them, a singular anticipation thrummed beneath the surface tension. Outside, the city pulsed with the same vibrant tension. Citizens traversed twilight streets, aware of the resonating discourse within courtroom walls. Discussions that began with a singular incident, now promising ripples of change extending outward. The narrative bore witness to transformative justice, one that didn't solamente speak to consequence, but envisioned a broader societal scaffold built anew upon the cornerstone of equity and understanding. As those involved in the trial returned to their respective abodes, the inevitability of tomorrow loomed with promise and gravity in equal measure, casting its shadow forward into a dialogue not yet complete, but ever evolving, a narrative shaped by each unfolding decade. Within shadows, lengthening to paint the courthouse steps, Adrienne and those by her side knew the task incompletely finished, a dynamic symphony settling into an overdue awakening, barren of neither resolution nor the aspiration to adapt, through continual challenge. Thus they retired beneath the sprawling canopy of stars, buoyed by humanity's persistent coalescence with justice, a narrative acknowledged steadfast, yet infinite in its embrace, fostering as the inexorable momentum of justice, composed from lived experience echoed through the fold of time, resolved never to be seated silent again. The courtroom hall had emptied into a somnolent quiet, the echoes of impassioned arguments and vivid testimonies lingering like ghostly imprints in the hallowed space. Outside the courthouse, the city maintained its frenetic rhythm, the ebb and flow of life continuing unabated, even as the tides of justice swirled beneath the surface. In the wake of these intense proceedings, Tiana found herself driving across the city toward an unfamiliar destination, a community center nestled in the heart of a vibrant neighborhood. The journey was both literal and metaphorical, a voyage into the depths of initiative and reform unbound by courtroom parameters. Her car hummed along the streets, the cityscape passing by in a cascade of illuminated windows and bustling sidewalks, each tableau a testament to lives unfolding in parallel existence with her own. As she navigated through these arteries of urban complexity, her mind replayed the myriad voices that had contributed to the rich fabric of perspectives showcased during the trial. The community center loomed ahead, a modest building with an expansive spirit, radiating warmth even amidst the chill of dusk settling over the city. Festive lights adorned the entrance, a tangible invitation to enter a space designed for dialogue and transformation. Upon arrival, Tiana was greeted by a chorus of familiar and new faces, their expressions infused with a shared purpose. The interior of the center was alive with energy, people mingling and engaging in earnest conversations, the air ripe with the potential of possibility. Lamar Jenkins, a stalwart and channeling activism into actionable strides, welcomed her with open arms, his embrace infused with camaraderie and mutual respect. "Tiana," he exclaimed, the timbre of his voice a harmonic blend of enthusiasm and urgency. "We're so glad you could make it. Tonight is a testament to the movement you've helped ignite." Tiana nodded, gratitude evident in her eyes. "It's a privilege to stand alongside so many who are committed to change," she replied, her words both humble and resolute. "This community embodies the resilience and strength we need to see this through." Together, they navigated through the throng of attendees, exchanging greetings and sharing laughter that rose above the undertone of serious discussion. Members of all ages populated the room, from young children engaged in vibrant activities to elders recounting stories brimming with wisdom and lived experience. The evening's program was designed to foster engagement, a tapestry woven from threads of history, art, and advocacy. Panels lined the walls, displaying visual art capturing snapshots of past civil rights milestones, while informational booths offered resources for civic involvement and reform initiatives. In one corner, a group of teenagers engaged in an animated discussion, their voices passionate as they envisioned their roles in continuing the movement. Tiana paused to listen, captivated by their fervor and unfiltered perspectives. "We need to make sure this isn't just a moment," one young woman said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Reform has to be a lifestyle, something we're all committed to every day." Her peers nodded in agreement, affirming the imperative to maintain momentum beyond courtroom verdicts into broader cultural shifts. Their enthusiasm was contagious, a beacon of hope illuminating the path ahead. Meanwhile, a circle of elders shared poignant reflections on past struggles, each tale a piece of the quilted history that shaped the present. Their stories resonated through the corridors of the center, reminding all present of the sacrifices and triumphs that had paved the way for this moment. Tiana was struck by the power of these shared stories, the dynamic interplay between past and present, wrestling for the narrative of the future. Here, within this lively mix of discourse and reflection, was the heartbeat of community, the collective striving toward a society characterized by justice and empathy. As the evening unfolded, Tiana took the stage, the room gently hushed as she began to speak. Her voice carried the weight of both personal experience and the aspirations of those gathered in solidarity. "This trial has been a significant step in our journey, but it's only one piece of a much larger puzzle," she began, her words resonant with clarity and conviction. Change requires more than verdicts. It necessitates daily actions, committed hearts, and an unyielding refusal to accept injustice. She continued, urging those present to draw upon their inherent strength and work collaboratively, each contribution a vital strand in the tapestry of systematic change. The applause that followed was resounding, a symphony of agreement and resilient resolve. The evening wound down, yet the conversations persisted, weaving themselves into the foundation of friendships and alliances that would drive the movement through the rocky terrain ahead. Tiana recognized that this commitment was not one she shouldered alone, but shared among many dedicated individuals willing to stand together against adversary fortifications. As she departed the community center, guided by the understanding that justice must be cultivated within the soil of community, Tiana felt invigorated by both the profound conversations shared that night and the promise of what lay ahead. Her path was illuminated by the echoes of their collective declaration. Resilience echoes most powerfully when it resounds through the hearts of the many. As the city embraced her return journey, the words of the young activists echoed within her, entwining with her own resolve. Tonight had reaffirmed that the movement toward justice was not merely a fleeting endeavor, but a legacy woven by many hands, bequeathed to future generations. Beneath the vast, gleaming canopy of stars, Tiana recommitted herself to nurturing this garden of progress, ensuring each voice, each story, continued to thrive and inspire as long as the path to justice remained at the hands of those courageous enough to dream it into reality. Underneath the muted glow of a late-night sky, the brimming city streets of Chicago unfold into a living tapestry of anticipation and reflection. The courthouse looms ahead, a grand edifice that now holds history within its walls, a memorial to the battles fought as much as the battles yet to come. Inside, the courtroom is expectant, the jury having been ushered into deliberation hours ago. Their task: to distill the myriad stories, facts, and emotions unfurled over countless days into a coherent decision that will reverberate beyond this room. Their absence fosters a palpable tension as participants and onlookers alike wonder at the threads of narrative being woven just beyond their sight. Tiana Coleman sits, watchful and composed, a bastion of quiet strength, amidst the whirling energies tracing paths throughout the courtroom. The room echoes with soft murmurs and shuffling papers, the air pregnant with possibility. Adrian Stone and Stephen Morris confer at their table, refining their strategies and observations, though the overtones of camaraderie fill the silences in their dialogue. The defense sits across the aisle, a mirrored intensity on their faces as they await the outcome, aware of its implications not only for Officer Reynolds but for the system at large. Gary Reynolds himself is a picture of subdued gravity, the weight of his actions and this trial etched into his visage like a sculptor's chisel rendered stone. All eyes flicker toward the jury room door as it opens with quiet dignity. 12 members file solemnly into the gallery, their gait a measure of the gravity of their task as they resume their seats. The courtroom stills, a held breath suspended in delicate equilibrium. Judge Horowitz, presiding with the wisdom and care of seasons passing in service to truth, acknowledges the jury foreman. Members of the jury, have you reached a decision? The foreman, a man marked with earnestness and the marks of thoughtful deliberation, stands. He holds in his hands not simply a piece of paper, but the culmination of voices and consequences woven into the DNA of the past weeks. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The words ripple through the crowd, a tremor resonating deeply within each soul present. Time compresses and distorts, a moment lingering in a state of suspended animation. In the matter of the State versus Gary Reynolds, the foreman's voice, measured and considerate, unfurls the narrative with each syllable. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on counts of abuse of power and misconduct, and recommend comprehensive reform measures be instituted within the department. The declaration settles within the room, an incongruous silence preceding the collective realization that justice has been spoken. Its resonance a clarion call, both punitive and instructive. Gasps, intermingled with murmurs, marked the space where tension had once hung dense, now dissipating into shared resolve. In this singular moment, history is forged not just in the outcome, but in the consequences rippling outward, embracing a wider spectrum of accountability and hope. Adrienne and Stephen share a look of vindicated relief, while Tiana allows herself a quiet breath of resolution. The trial is not an end, but a pivot, a cornerstone upon which possibilities are built. Across the aisle, Reynolds absorbs the verdict with a solemn nod, aware it transcends personal failure to become a pivotal inflection point, an opportunity for long-needed introspection within the protective ranks he once unequivocally believed in. Judge Horowitz, embodying tempered authority, delivers his closing remarks, reinforcing the necessity of learning from this chapter. May this verdict light a path for meaningful progress and reform, ensuring that justice remains active, virtuous, and in constant pursuit of equality for all. The courtroom begins to empty, each individual participant carrying within them echoes of the lessons learned and the stories intermingled across lines of separation. The soundlessness of disbanding transforms into the streets, a shared movement towards the unspoken future looming large on the horizon. Outside, an awaiting crowd bursts into applause, a communion of hope tempered by steadfast determination. Signs of support wave high as the waves roll in, each placard testament to the communal experiences sculpting their collective narrative. Reporters jostle to capture the aftermath, voices eager to document a moment of reinvigorated faith in the judiciary's ability to serve as a transformative force. For citizens and activists, there is understanding heralded by this moment's promise, one that speaks to both rediscovered trust and continued vigilance. Tiana stands among them, meeting the gaze of those who have walked with her through the darkness into dawning light, a kinship illuminated by fearless confrontation of systemic inequities. The bond that unites them is fiercely linked, transcending societal rifts through shared pursuit of an enduring good. Amidst the cacophony, she hears Emily's voice reach above the clamor, resolutely proud. "Mom, this is going to change things, isn't it?" Tiana smiles, not just with her face, but with her entire spirit, the formidable strength of one who understands the intertwined texture of struggle and reform. "Yes, it is," she assures. "Today beats with the rhythm of possibility, but it's up to us to continue this journey. Together, hand in hand, Tiana and her family move through the jubilant throngs, buoyed by the harmonies of allies and community. Beneath the expansive canopy, the city pulses with life, infused by resilience, boundless in its potential, forever gazing toward the evolution of justice through this immutable present. At that intersection of destiny and determination, the narrative winds its hopeful course, a tapestry vast yet intimate, begun anew with relentless promise and collective embrace, as it etches pathways unseen into the continuum of tomorrows waiting to be born. As the courtroom emptied and the energy of the crowd spilled into the streets, a palpable sense of catharsis mixed with the entrenched desire for sustained reform took hold. Conversations continued to unfurl amid the backdrop of a city pulsating with a newfound sense of empowerment, an unbridled acknowledgement that justice, while delivered, was but a catalyst for deeper systemic changes. Throughout Chicago, the verdict sent shockwaves that penetrated into the offices and meeting rooms where law enforcement policies were drafted and debated. At the heart of these discussions was a reinforced commitment to transparency and accountability, a mandate emanating from both the public sphere and the judicial resolution itself. Within the precincts, officers gathered in clusters, their discussions animated yet underscored by a cautious contemplation. Here, the verdict served as a mirror, reflecting not only individual conduct, but the collective ethos permeating their ranks. Some faces showed relief, while others bore expressions of introspection, aware that the status quo was no longer tenable. Captain Evelyn Norris convened a meeting with her officers, intent on fostering dialogue that promised not only introspection, but actionable transformation. The room filled slowly, figures moving tentatively at first, gradually reassured by the presence of familiarity amidst the need for change. "Thank you all for coming," Norris began, her voice steady but imbued with the weight of recent events. "We need to have an honest conversation about where we go from here. The verdict is a wake-up call, not just for one of us, but for all of us." Among those present were Officer Ben Hardy and Mei Lin, their expressions conveying resolve tempered by the vulnerability of uncertainty. They knew that the responsibility to realign the department's moral compass lay not only in leadership, but also within every rank-and-file officer. "We need a culture shift," May said, breaking the silence that followed Norris's introduction. Her words resonated in the quiet room, an echo of collective responsibility. No more turning a blind eye. Every voice matters if we want to rebuild trust. The acknowledgement was met with nods, subtle gestures that signified a shared understanding, a readiness to listen and commit to rigorous introspection. As Borislav Petrov, another seasoned officer renowned for his steadfast principles, added his voice, it was clear that a groundswell was forming. "We've all felt it, Seem. We've all felt it," Petrov intoned, eyes scanning familiar faces tempered by time and duty. "We need to embrace change, not as an exception, but as a norm. It starts with us. Every decision, every interaction, it counts." This conversation, one of many happening throughout Chicago's institutions, mirrored the broader discourse unfolding citywide. Leaders and community members, citizens and policymakers, all engaged in a symphony of dialogues, collectively seeking recalibration. Back at the courthouse, Tiana gathered with Adrian Stone, Stephen Morris, and other key figures instrumental in steering the trial toward its impactful conclusion. Their discussions were forward-thinking, contemplative of the ways in which the precedent set here could illuminate paths for communities far beyond their current reach. "This case needs to be more than a trial that fades into history," Adrian mused, her eyes alight with the possibilities yet to unfold. "We have a duty to ensure it serves as a foundational stone for broader reform," Stephen agreed, his demeanor hopeful but pragmatic. "We need to harness this momentum to implement policy changes citywide, engage leaders in education, law enforcement, community advocacy, bring them to the table. Real change is intersectional." Their plans began to take form, strategies unfurling like banners upon which promises of equity and systemic scrutiny were inscribed. While the legal victory marked a pivotal moment, they knew their work was ongoing. A relay race in which they passed the baton of accountability and reform onto one another. Meanwhile, in coffee shops, around kitchen tables, and within neighborhood forums, citizens participated in grassroots dialogues that fortified the understanding that each individual held the power to influence change. Change that stemmed from unity, integrity, and a shared commitment to justice, underlined by compassion. Tiana, embodying both a personal and public call to action, recognized the onus placed upon her role within this arc of transformation. Her signature smile, one of palpable warmth, mingled with the responsibility of tending to these burgeoning commitments, a torch carried proudly among the multitudes advocating for change. The roar of collective voices rose to meet the silence of complacency, unity forging a nexus through which dreams of an equitable society converged. Beneath the rhythm of city life, potential wound through like kinetic energy waiting to be channeled. A testament to resilience and collaboration, as dusk fell across the skyline, casting its golden hue over the city's industrious sprawl, Tiana knew that the work ahead was not one of singular endeavor, but of collaborative enfranchisement, painting tomorrow's horizon with the hues of determined hope for equitable justice. Despite victories, the journey to reshape systems and policies anew had just begun, demanding relentless pursuit. Together, bound by commitment and unity as actors and architects, the vast chorus ushered forward into an evolving narrative. One that wouldn't simply speak of progress, but continue to rewrite the intricacies of a just society, one reform at a time, as tirelessly and tenaciously as the unwavering spirit guiding them ever onward into promise-filled dawn. As the city's spirit recalibrated itself around the verdict's implications, a distinctive harmony began to emerge. The streets of Chicago, which had been a stage for debate and protest, now resonated with introspection and the ceaseless hum of progress. This was not merely the turning of a page, but the drafting of a new chapter in the city's narrative, a testament to a future being constructed with deliberation and care. The precinct, once a fortress of procedural familiarity, transformed into a crucible for reinvention. Training sessions were reimagined, emphasizing community engagement and bias reduction, providing officers with tools not only of enforcement, but of empathy and understanding. This was a paradigm shift rooted not just in policy, but in principle, reverberating through halls newly welcoming to change. Within this evolving dynamic, Officer Maylin and Ben Hardy took on new roles as facilitators of reform. Their values shepherded discussions and workshops designed to bridge the once gaping chasm between police and the communities they served. These sessions became flourishing grounds, rich with the testimonies of past struggles and fueled by the urgency of reform, facilitating dialogues guiding participants toward mutual trust and justice. In one such gathering, housed in a sleek, nondescript conference room of the precinct, officers sat side by side with community leaders, their collective presence indicative of the commitment to forming a shared inclusive narrative. Laminated sheets and pamphlets circulated, the elements of reform detailed in concise, actionable language. Maylin took the lead, her tone firm yet hopeful. Today, we're here not just to discuss policy, but to cultivate a relationship. It's about understanding each other's experiences, challenges, and aspirations. Real change isn't just about adjustment, but about transformation. The room responded to her words, the audience a cross-section of age, gender, and community role. Each person present carried with them a mosaic of perspectives, a mosaic that May gathered like a skilled artist into the atelier of discussion and reflection. Beside her, Ben Hardy spoke candidly about bridging known divides. We must extend our purpose beyond just protection. Understanding is integral, deeply intertwined with everything justice should represent. Their words prompted dialogue interspersed with personal stories. A mother shared her fears for her son, a student recounted experiences of profiling, an officer spoke of the unseen pressures within the force. It was in these moments, within the ambit of tempered vulnerability, that true understanding began to nurture the seeds of change. When officers and community members alike expressed their truths, the static barriers between them softened beneath clarity's soft glow, replaced by an interconnected vision. As the meeting drew to a close, a tangible sense of unity and newfound respect filled the air. The once crestfallen precinct now vibrated with optimism, tangible in the exchanges of handshakes, commitments, and fresh perspectives entwined into unanimity. Simultaneously, at educational institutions throughout the city, inspired educators piloted curriculums centered on civil rights history, social justice initiatives, and community advocacy. Students engaged with newfound vigor, their young voices challenging conventions with the insight of lived experience. Deanna Coleman, traversing these institutions as both guide and learner, catalyzed this academic reformation. Her presence and story provided students with a living example of how one person's stand could effect profound change, a narrative not confined to courtroom rhetoric but lived principle. One afternoon, as Tiana visited a local high school, students and teachers gathered in a sunlit auditorium ripe with dialogue. She was both an orator and participant in this exchange, her story grounding the complex realities shared by many in attendance. A student stood, youthful enthusiasm etched with a hint of nervous resolve. "Judge Coleman, how can we make sure our generation keeps fighting for what's right?" Her question was one of sincere inquiry, underscoring the themes permeating the assembly. Tiana considered the question, appreciation warming her features as she responded, by staying curious, staying informed, and always questioning the status quo. Real change comes not from apathy, but from engagement. Use your voice, use your vote, use your presence. They're powerful instruments for justice. Her words resonated, eliciting nods and impassioned whispers that fanned the flames of collective ambition. The auditorium thrummed with a shared promise: between generations, crafting pathways to keep the momentum lit. As her day wound down, Tiana stood watching the city embrace the dusk, vibrant hues enveloping skyscrapers and neighborhoods alike. The journey embarked upon was arduous, demanding vigilance and collective perseverance as its necessity demanded. Despite the challenges, the city's vistas continued to illuminate possibility, a reflection of the relentless, ever-burning courage of those committed to reimagining what justice and community could truly become. Tiana knew the road ahead remained arduous, but sensed the spirit of unity already weaving its course alongside each action, dialogue, and reform enacted. This narrative, being crafted knee to knee and shoulder to shoulder, foretold a landscape of promise, one bound by resilience and timeless fortitude, moving serenely toward an enlightened horizon. At this junction of interwoven destinies and futures, the pages of tomorrow stayed alive, with the determined rhythm of those whose voices rose in harmonious call, always moving onwards, always together, towards the new dawn of justice defined by empathetic humanity. The city, having reverberated with calls for justice and reform, began to redefine itself against the backdrop of renewed purpose. The courthouse, once the epicenter of a tumultuous trial, now served as a beacon of a symbol, accountability and transformation. Its legacy, woven into the narratives of those who fought for change, became an enduring testament to the potency of collective action. In the weeks following the verdict, a palpable shift permeated every facet of community life. This was not just an ephemeral moment in history, but a sustained awakening, evidenced by the flurry of grassroots initiatives springing up to harness the momentum of reform. Tiana Coleman found herself at the heart of this movement, her role expanding beyond that of a judge to embrace that of a mentor, advocate, and catalyst. Her phone rang incessantly with invitations to speak and collaborate, each request a testament to the communal thirst for engagement and guidance. One such invitation led her to a meeting with members of the newly formed Coalition for Justice and Accountability, a diverse group of activists, educators, and community leaders determined to translate the trial's momentum into substantive policies. Their headquarters, a repurposed warehouse in the south of the city, thrummed with the energy of shared vision and tireless dedication. As Tiana entered the building, she was greeted by banners proclaiming equality and justice, their vibrant colors a visual representation of the spirit contained within those walls. The air was alive with purpose voices mingling, papers rustling, ideas taking shape under the guidance of those devoted to nurturing them into reality. Lamar Jenkins, now a pivotal figure within the coalition, met her with an exuberant grin and a firm handshake. "Welcome to our humble abode, Tiana," he said, a note of pride evident in his voice. "We've got so much to discuss, and your insights will be invaluable to our efforts." Tiana nodded, her curiosity piqued by the atmosphere of industrious optimism. "I'm honored to be part of this ongoing journey, Lamar. There's real work to be done, and I sense that this group is more than ready to face the challenges ahead." He led her to a large conference room where a meeting was already underway. Around the table sat a cross-section of community influencers, teachers, activists, lawyers, and young volunteers, all contributing their voices to the conversation. Today's agenda centered on the development of a comprehensive action plan, one that encompassed policy reform, community education, and sustained advocacy. Tiana listened intently, absorbing the passion and ingenuity flowing freely between participants. "We need to focus on educational reforms," suggested Dr. Rebecca Steele, an education reform advocate with decades of experience. "Start in the schools. Educate our youth about their rights and the importance of civic participation. Plant the seeds early and nurture them with the tools they need to advocate for themselves and others." A social worker named Carlos echoed the sentiment. "And we can't forget about community policing initiatives. We need officers who understand and are integrated into our communities, building trust and respect through genuine relationships, not fear and authority." As the discussion unfolded, Tiana observed the foundation being laid for sustainable transformation. The coalition was a microcosm of the larger movement, each member applying their unique expertise to forge paths yet untraveled, yet crucial for social progress. When Tiana finally spoke, it was with the gravitas and warmth that had become her hallmark. The work you're doing here is not just timely, it's essential. We have an opportunity to turn this case into a catalyst, not only for reform, but for renewing the very fabric of our social contract. Her words resonated deeply, sparking renewed vigor in the room. The coalition knew the road would be long and fraught with resistance, yet the unity prevailing among them promised that each challenge could be faced with resilience strengthened by communal support. As the meeting concluded, Tiana remained amidst the bustling center of activity, observing individuals engaged fervently in planning sessions, creative brainstorming, and community outreach. It was a living testament to the possibility inherent within collective resolve, a potent reminder that, together, they were architects of future social landscapes, envisaging justice with every initiative fostered. Leaving the coalition's headquarters later that evening, Tiana was enveloped by the cool embrace of night, underlining the resolve in her heart. She tread carefully along the path beyond that symbolic warehouse, each step imagining future narratives shaped by community-driven enlightenment. In the glow of street lamps, conversations carried on unchecked, window displays reflected aspiration, and the city pulsed with determined cadence, a metropolis alive with an awakened spirit. The commitment forged within those walls extended far beyond their borders, intertwined with the sharpened faith of people who demanded not only progress but inclusivity, diversity, and hope as they crafted tomorrow's brighter dawn. Thus, this convergence of hearts and minds resolved to nurture the profound change they sought, encircling hope with relentless tenacity until the symphony they called society sung freely, unfettered by shadows of injustice, splintered by the dawn of reformation, diversely imbued and courageously woven. In the dynamic aftermath of the trial, an atmosphere of collective dedication settled over Chicago, as the city's pulse synchronously beat with a rhythm of renewal. The communities, invigorated by the verdict, were eager to capitalize on the momentum that now surged through their veins, propelling them toward transformative action. Initiatives that had once been mere ideas scribbled on notepads had rapidly garnered life, blossoming through the cracks of what was once established norm. Across neighborhoods, cooperation flourished, and a chorus of reformative voices dangled in perceptible harmony. For Tiana Coleman, these developments presented a continuum, an opening for dialogues that spanned beyond the immediacy of courtroom justice, towards restorative reconciliation and accountability. Her commitment to fostering these newly paved paths led her to a series of town hall meetings organized for the citizens by the citizens, a vibrant tapestry of open forums where societal fabric was inspected and community alliances forged with fierce intentionality. One particular evening found Tiana seated at the head of a makeshift panel in a packed gymnasium. The scent of promise was thick in the air, an unspoken anticipation riding in on the heels of collective engagement. The gym was warm, the ceiling echoing subdued conversations that resonated with an eagerness to participate in shaping their shared destiny. Community members crammed the bleachers, facing the panelists. Representatives from law enforcement, civil rights organizations, education, and local government. Each sat poised to engage, listen, and participate in the impactable conversations dialing promise into tangible action. Among the attendees were faces varied by age and background, young activists brimming with ardor, retirees eager to share their wisdom and experiences, parents seeking assurances of safer futures, and professionals dedicated to activating change within their spheres of influence. The evening kicked off with opening remarks, highlighting recent strides and setting forth a blueprint for progress. Panelists spoke to a holistic vision of interconnected reforms, reinforcing the synergy necessary to galvanize sustainable restoration. As the discussion progressed, Tiana's resonant voice cut through the layers as a deliberate cadence, a beacon of stability. Tonight, we're here because we've recognized the power we hold when unified by a common goal. Justice isn't simply a destination, It's an ongoing journey that demands our vigilance and unwavering commitment. Her words washed over the congregation like rain on parched land, evoking nods and scattered applause from the community eager for a beacon. Eyes fixated, attentive, participants reoriented to face the challenges that lay ahead with clarity, incorporating multi-generational perspectives into their agenda. A poignant moment arose when an elder, Ms. Ruby Henderson, took the microphone. Her presence commanded attention, her voice a tapestry woven with years of experience and vestiges of hardship faced and conquered. "What do we tell our children?" she asked with gravitas punctuated by sincerity, "when they ask us what we're doing to build a better future for them?" The room hushed, her inquiry resonating to the deepest roots of parental and societal conscience. A consensus stirred in hushed whispers and introspective silence that bespoke the diligence required of them all. Her inquiry kindled a vibrant discourse, suggestions and ideas eagerly shared, from educational reforms and inclusive community programs to mental health initiatives. Each contribution served as another stitch in weaving a collectively sustained narrative of hope, reflecting a renewed commitment to shaping an equitable society. John, a youthful voice embodying a generational call, spoke from the audience and punctuated the conversation. "We need spaces to train in empathy as much as we train in academics and athletics. How do we make caring intrinsic to every interaction?" His question ignited dialogue akin to shared recognition, a cacophony of voices that fueled pragmatic ideas, affirming the necessity of both listening and acting with purpose. Through collaboration, these forums ignited initiatives seeded by the core values of equality and compassion. The town hall became an incubator for potential, the collective inhalation and exhalation, a cyclical testament to resilience, blossomed. Solutions found roots that were not just theoretical but implementable, transcending the barriers that previously kept growth languishing in shade. As the evening concluded, community members lingered in the gym. The echoes of their conversations vibrated anew against the walls, buoyed by widened kinship. Laughter mingled with hopeful banter, a harmony unbroken by skepticism, underpinned by guiding faith. Amidst the finality of that forum and the pledge to carry foresight into action, Tiana felt the unmistakable warmth of possibility spread through her being. This was not just the conclusion of dialogue. It marked a continuation, a handoff of lessons learned, passed through lived experience, to the multitude determined to retain its transformation. The scene unfolding around her seemed imbued with a newly awakened spirit, soul-bound to a community, pledging allegiance, not to ideals enshrined in abstract, but to principles enacted every day, shared by voices in commonality and struggle. In the rising dawn, with the city as a backdrop to a tapestry woven from solidarity, compassion, and courageous vision, lit an unending journey, still formulating the opus of justice reimagined by those charged to carry its torch ever forward, across spans unseen, resilience reflecting silhouette in radiant emergence. As dawn broke, casting its gentle light over the cityscape, Chicago seemed to exhale collectively, a city reborn, its streets gleaming with the promise of renewal. Within homes, cafes, and office spaces, the dialogue continued to pulse with the energy of transformation, the iterative rhythm of progress persisting like an ongoing heartbeat of change. It was within this renewed embrace of unity that Tiana Coleman, now at the conclusion of this phase of her journey, found herself reflecting on the path that had led her here. Sitting quietly in her chambers as dawn's light filtered through half-closed blinds, it was a moment where introspection and tranquility intertwined. The overwhelming response to the verdict and the subsequent groundswell of engagement had propelled discussions beyond the walls of the courthouse, far into the city's core, reshaping it with dynamism and promise. From the seeds sown in courtroom trials sprung the flourishing vines of communal discourse, bearing the fruits of reform and reconciliation. Days turned to weeks, and Tiana stood as both witness and participant within this evolving legacy, a shepherd steering the confluence of justice and empathy. The calls, the letters, the requests for her presence at forums, schools, and civic engagements were testament to the city's collective embracing of change and its resilience. Amid this serene setting, Emily entered the room, her presence filling the space with the vibrancy of youthful determination. She approached Tiana with quiet purpose, holding a tablet open to an interview featuring them both discussing the landmark trial and its broader implications. "Mom," Emily said, pride shining through her voice, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. The trial, the changes, the future. You've shown all of us what real justice looks like." Tiana nodded, appreciating the wisdom in Emily's thoughts. "And you've shown me what courage and hope can accomplish. This isn't just my journey, it's ours, yours, mine, and the community's. We're writing history together." Emily's eyes widened with enthusiasm, and she smiled, a beacon of hope warmly kindled. "I want to be part of this, to help stand up for what's right." In that moment, the torch seamlessly passed from one generation to the next, igniting a legacy of advocacy alive with potential and guided by shared vision. Tiana understood that the future they were shaping relied on the determination of those ready to challenge the status quo, like Emily, who stood at the precipice of possibility. Together, mother and daughter gazed out at the city unfurling beyond them, bathed in the morning light, a panorama of interconnected lives, all weaving the complex narrative of a society striving toward true equity. The echoes of recent transformation still resonated deeply throughout the city. Each echoed interaction witnessed intangible progress. The time of reflection, accountability, and renewal had to meet the tireless dedication of people like Lamar, Adrienne, Ben, May, and countless others, whose unyielding spirit animated a shared commitment to justice. The vibrancy of each newly formed coalition, the steadfast initiatives rooted in schools, and the open dialogues threading through neighborhoods painted a portrait of a city fully awake, its citizens empowered to sculpt the contours of justice. In the zenith of these reflections, Tiana felt a profound sense of peace, a manifestation of the struggle and perseverance of past generations, an anthem echoing forward into futures unafraid. "Shine in the warmth of realized justice. Remember," Tiana imparted softly, her voice a gentle edifice solidifying Emily's resolve. "Integrity is our guide, empathy our compass. Never doubt your power to effect change, to carry forth the journey we've embarked on together." Extraordinary hopes stretched boundless toward tomorrow's horizon, where justice, resilience, and sincerity dwelled in intimate embrace, cultivated by countless hands and hearts intertwined. As Tiana and Emily stood at the precipice of this new chapter, their hearts echoed with the whispered promise of every soul touched by conviction, echoing in shared triumph. Change was no longer an abstract desire. It was a tangible, living testament to the infinite possibilities realized when human tenacity joined forces with compassion. In these moments of shared legacy lay profound truths, awe-inspiring and enduring, woven into a world vibrant and resilient, ready to reflect the beauty of its potential realized. Would the torchlight of justice guide them all to such realized possibility? Would the spark of courage shine bright enough to inspire others? If today has answered these calls, imagine what tomorrow might yet sing. For the stories we tell and the actions we take bind us intricately to the enduring fabric of hope and justice, a narrative carried forward as living breath across expansive horizons. If you were inspired by this journey, feel the call, share the story, and join the chorus illuminating pathways toward an unbound future. What part will you play in this transformative symphony? Will you extend your voice to uplift others, ensuring justice's reverberation through every chamber of our society? Join us as we forge onwards, unrelenting and resilient, toward a world where equity is more than a dream. It's the song of humanity realized. Here concludes our journey through these chapters of bold reformation. We invite you to support this continued narrative through community, action, and reflection. Like, share, and subscribe to stay interconnected as we push these stories forward. hand in hand, voice in harmony.